Doing great this morning. I'm so excited that we're starting off this great event, STEM for All Together. Yes, some claps in the chat box. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, and you know what? We've been putting this together for a while now. And so I think it's time we kick this off. What do you say?
Yes, we are super excited to welcome all of you to our first ever STEM for All national convening. My name is Kristen Record. I am a physics teacher in the wonderful state of Connecticut. I've been in the classroom for 23 years, and I am the 2011 Connecticut Teacher of the Year. My pal here, Diane, and I have been the co-leads of the National STEM Fellowship now for the past 6 years, and today's event is an outgrowth of our work that we do through NNSTOY. So Diane, will you introduce yourself?
Good morning, afternoon, wherever you may be. And yes, my name is Diane Smokorowski. I am the 2013 Kansas Teacher of the Year, and I currently serve as the coordinator of digital literacy and digital citizenship in the Wichita Public Schools, which means I lead the ed tech team. But I absolutely have been overjoyed and excited with all the things that we have been doing to explore the idea of STEM for all. And so we're excited to have you with us as we explore this topic a little further and share our findings.
Yes. As we said, this event is co-sponsored by the National Network of State Teachers of the Year, and we do hope that those of you who are new to our organization stay in touch with us. You can get on our mailing list by going to the NNSTOY website and checking that out and get connected to all of our other fantastic events that we do throughout the year. Our other sponsor for today's event is VOYA Financial, and we are so grateful to them for not only sponsoring our fellowship in the first 6 years, but also just being a wonderful support and enthusiastic partner in all the STEM work that we do and just for teachers in general. So we're going to kick it off with our welcome video from Braden from VOYA.
My name is Braden Mayrish. I'm Vice President of VOYA Foundation. I'm sorry I couldn't be attending live today, but for good reason. This weekend is also our largest financial literacy event of the year, the championship round of the National Personal Finance Challenge. And I won't go into details as some of you may have even participated in the challenge before, but one of the main reasons we participate is because just like our work with the National Network of State Teachers of the Year and almost all of our programs, the challenge is driven by the engagement of educators and taking ownership of the innovations that improve student outcomes. And that's what brings us here today. Your work in the STEM for All convening is all about empowering you all to come up with new ways of engaging and including students in what is a rapidly changing field. And as an 11-year veteran of a finance and technology company that's been constantly hiring, let me let you in on a little manager's secret. Nobody knows what the future may bring. Our workforce, our institution, and our technology is changing in a very rapid and unpredictable way. It's impossible to predict the future and what our teams may need in the next 5 to 10 years. Instead, as a country, we should be giving individuals on the front lines of workforce readiness, just like our teachers, the skills and the resources they need to adapt their curriculum, to bring their lessons to life, to bring professionals into the classroom, and to ensure that what they're teaching engaging students from all walks of life and encourages them to try things differently. This is a concept that NNSTOY and the VOYA STEM Fellows, the leaders of this conference, have really run with. They're here to get you all to embrace innovation, and I would say you can consider this your creative license to do just that. On the subject of the STEM Fellows, I want to thank them for not only planning this conference, but for engaging with us for 5 meaningful years. Over these years, they've mentored early career educators, they've researched the future of engaging STEM lessons, and even the future of the physical classrooms themselves, and they've planned professional development opportunities just like today to bring their findings to life, to share their knowledge with you all so that educators nationally can amplify that success. And that success is seen not only in the drive of their amazing leaders, Smoke and Kristen Record, but in the engagement of all the fellows. And with that in mind, a special congratulations to one of the original STEM fellows, Melissa Collins, who was this year named the 2023 Tennessee Teacher of the Year. I'd also like to thank NNSTOY for their shared investment in the fellowship. The program really would not be possible without their team's leadership and guidance to VOYA. The VOYA STEM Fellowship and our broader work with NNSTOY is part of an approach to engaging with teachers that we call VOYA Teacher Voices. It's our signature and longest running program focused on recruiting the next generation of awesome educators, providing professional development opportunities to expand educator expertise, recognizing teachers' achievements, and of course, providing classroom funding opportunities. And VOYA Teacher Voices has been doing all of this for 25 years. More information can be found at voyateachervoices.com, but before I close out, I wanted to share my favorite finding that the fellowship has brought to VOYA. It's that learning, and therefore workforce readiness, the success of our nation's employers, of our economy as a whole, is not possible without the promotion of failure, without even the encouragement of failure. The compassion of teachers, I think, is illustrated best by the level to which you all view failure as an absolutely essential part of a student's learning process. You can't have tried if you never fail. Innovation is based off of failures. It's necessary and it should be supported. And one failure should never be discouraged, but celebrated as a learning opportunity, as a chance to try something new or try something differently. And I've brought this learning into my own team as we work to adapt to a rapidly changing industry and country. And it's brought us success as a company and as a team when we support one another through trying new things. So thank you so much for bringing this to us. Thank you all for attending today to learn how to apply this to your own classrooms and students. And with that, I'm very happy to kick today off.
That starts it off in the best way possible, don't you think, Kristen?
I think that's fantastic. And how wonderful is it to know that our work in the VOYA STEM Fellowship has had an impact of VOYA Financial, that they now have learned how to embrace failing forward as part of their own work culture. And that's just, makes my heart happy this morning to hear that.
Indeed. So we've got a keynote coming up.
We do. I am so excited about our keynote. I almost said this morning, but I'm on the East Coast, which is actually this afternoon. So I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker. I'm going to quick share. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So our STEM for All national convening is kicking off this morning with a fantastic keynote speaker, our good friend and partner, Teresa Mooney, who is the Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives from Beyond 100K. And Teresa began her career as a Teach for America Corps member in Texas as a 4th grade teacher. Now, as a high school teacher, God bless those of you who teach the littles. I don't know how you do it. So God bless Teresa. God bless all of you. Starting off her career as a 4th grade teacher. She later helped to launch the KIPP Heritage Academy in California as a 6th grade social studies teacher. And again, as a high school teacher, I gotta say, middle school students. Again, God bless the middle school teachers. I never, ever, ever could survive a day in your shoes in your classroom with those middle school kids. So if that weren't enough, prior to joining the Beyond 100K 10, Teresa led educator workforce initiatives at the Council of Chief State School Officers, otherwise known as CCSSO, where she supported state education agencies in developing and implementing systems and structures that impact students' equitable access to great teaching. So we could think of no better person to kick off a STEM for All event than our good friend, Teresa. So Teresa, welcome to the stage. Welcome to our STEM for All Fellowship. And we are so excited to be learning from you today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kristen. I am so excited to be here with all of you. As Kristen shared, I started off my career as a teacher, and so I am personally very excited to be participating in today's PD alongside all of you. I've also known and been part of NNSTOY's work for a long time, having led a lot of our teacher-facing work at CCSSO, which included supporting the National Teacher of the Year program and State Teacher of the Year programs across the country for many years. So it's wonderful to get to see some familiar names in the chat, some old friends, some newer friends, and I am just so grateful again to be here with all of you. So I am just really honored to be able to present on behalf of Beyond 100K and share with you all more about our work to end the STEM teacher shortage and share more about where we see the future of STEM learning going. So here's what I'm hoping that we'll be able to do today. I'll share a little bit more about Beyond 100K, where we've been for the past decade or so of work, and where we see ourselves going for the next decade. I'll then share about a specific initiative that we embarked on a couple years ago called the Uncommission, where we heard from hundreds of young people across the country who told us what their experiences in STEM were like. And they helped point us toward what that next step for our organization would be, and has really given shape to what we want to focus on in our next 10 years. And then finally, I want to share a little bit more with you about what we see as the future of STEM learning. And you're seeing a little spoiler or teaser here about what that is. We see the future of STEM learning really needing to center on this idea of belonging. So I'm very excited to engage with all of you about that today. So by the end of today, here's what I'm hoping we will all have been able to do. I want to tell you about what that massively participatory process, the Uncommission, can yield. And hopefully you all walk away being able to apply similar tools in your classrooms or communities to solve audacious problems that you maybe are working on. You'll also have a chance to hear some of the stories from young people from our uncommission process in their own words, what they are experiencing and what they are hoping for STEM in the future. And finally, I hope that you all have some good tools to take away and apply in your communities, your classrooms, especially tools around belonging. So, with that, I wanted to actually start with a quick reflection for you all to do. I'd love for each of you to just silently think about a time that you felt a sense of belonging in your STEM learning experiences, as well as a time that you felt a sense of non belonging in your STEM learning experiences. You can keep this to yourself. If you want to, you can share in the chat, but let's just take 30 seconds or so to do that silent reflection. Because this idea of belonging is going to be coming up throughout this presentation, I ask that you just keep these stories close to your heart as we go through the session today. Thank you so much for engaging in that to start us off. So, with that, I'd love to start by sharing a little bit more about Beyond 100K's work. If you met us 10 years ago, you would have known us as 100K and 10. We now are Beyond 100K. And our work is all focused on ending the STEM teacher shortage. And the reason for this is that it's projected that 3.5 million STEM jobs in the US, or there will be 3.5 million STEM jobs in the US by 2025. And 2 million of those jobs will go unfilled, despite a national focus on STEM over the past decade. That's according to the US Bureau of Labor. We also know that the STEM workforce lacks racial diversity, with Black, Latinx, and Native Americans representing only 24% of the workforce right now. We also know that STEM teachers are key if we are going to prepare that next generation of STEM workforce folks. We know that teachers are the strongest in school influence on students. But we also know that too many STEM teachers are leaving the classroom every year. Today, about 60,000 or 8% of STEM teachers leave the profession each year. And the greatest impact affects communities that predominantly teach students of color. We also know that during the pandemic, proficiency in science decreased for elementary students and decreased or stayed the same for middle school and high school students. It's so crucial that we instill the foundation of scientific literacy early on. So at Beyond 100K, we're asking ourselves, how can students build that passion and skills in STEM if they don't have teachers with the right education to help build them? So our work began over a decade ago when President Obama shared a call to the nation for 100,000 new and excellent STEM teachers to be prepared in the next decade. We saw what he saw, what educators knew, what companies and organizations were beginning to experience: a growing economic divide, a decrease in innovation, a racial gap in STEM, much of which was in response to students not having access to excellent and diverse STEM teachers. So we at 100K and 10 took up his call. We united a network to co develop and implement solutions to prepare more STEM teachers for American classrooms. In our first decade, we exceeded that goal of 100,000 STEM teachers, preparing 108,000 STEM teachers by 2021. More than 300 organizations and 3,000 individuals contributed, including many of you on this call. And here's how we got there and how we continue to do our work together as a network. Our biggest challenges are too complex and tangled to be solved by any one organization alone. So our network is made up of 130 plus diverse organizations and leaders who are contributing collectively to our overall goals. The map helps us identify the causes of the STEM teacher shortage, the lack of equity in the field, and focuses on the network of the greatest focuses the network on the greatest opportunities for impact. And just a little teaser, my colleague Pomai will be doing a session all about our map later on, and I hope that you join her. The tools that we use as a network help accelerate this process. They build trust and enable shared problem solving so that our network partners can come together and do more than perhaps they could do alone within their organizations. And so here's where we're going in the next 10 years. We know that we met our first moonshot goal, and so we started thinking about what comes next a few years ago. And this is what we plan to do. Over the next decade, our work with our network will prepare more STEM teachers and really make sure that they thrive in their classrooms and ensure that all students, especially students of color, are thriving. I'm going to go into more detail on this moonshot and how we got there by telling you more about the process for getting there. So, while our first goal was influenced by a president, we knew that this time around we wanted to do things differently and literally flip the process on its head. We focused on those closest to the problem, which we defined as young people themselves, especially Black, Latinx, and Native American youth. And we invited them to share their stories with us about how they were experiencing STEM learning. And we thought that by them sharing their stories, they would be able to point us in the right direction to where we needed to go as an organization. We focused on Black, Latinx, and Native American students in particular because the available data show us that those groups have historically and consistently been excluded from STEM. And so, if we understood the experiences of those most excluded, that would allow us to design solutions that will expressly benefit those students, as well as all students and teachers more broadly. So, through this storytelling process, which we called the uncommission, young people could share anything they wanted with us about their experience in STEM. They could share a positive story, they could share a negative story, they could share anything in between. The prompt was really wide open. And we believed that by hearing these stories, the wisdom of young people would point us to where we needed to go next in order to achieve a more equitable STEM landscape for all students. So, by the end of this process, we only took about 3 months to collect stories. Nearly 600 young people stepped up to share their personal stories about STEM, with 82% of those young people being young people of color. The illustration that you're seeing here on your screen features some quotes from some of our real storytellers, Kendra Hale, Caitlin Varela, Dorianas Perez, and one anonymous storyteller. And what this illustration shows is why they decided to share their stories with us. What you're seeing here are things like to challenge what others may think about our future, to open up a platform, to give minority students a voice, to grow and defy the odds against us. And so I wanted to share a couple stories from young people. The first from Gabrielle. I know it might be a little tough for folks to read, so just for accessibility, I'm going to read Gabrielle's story aloud to you. She said, I believe that the reason why I struggled with science and math was because Latinas aren't meant to be smart in science and math. When I first enrolled in biology at my high school, I earned an A. My teacher pulled me aside and told me that he nominated me to be moved into the school's honor classes, and I was shocked. Never once had a teacher believed in my ability to succeed, and never once had a teacher gone out of the way for my STEM education. It was this encounter that eventually opened the door for me to fall in love with science, and it was one of the main factors that led me to study neuroscience in college. When we turn to young people like Gabrielle to better understand their experiences and tap their brilliance, we learned over and over again that the problem was not a lack of will or passion. More often than not, when students persist in STEM, it is because teachers like Gabrielle's high school biology teacher made them believe that they belong. I wanted to share one more story. This is from Ephraim. And again, I'll read it aloud just so everyone can read this with me. He said, I used to be the kid that goes, math is not for me. I'm not a math person. In fifth grade, I took the Texas Star state exam. I did pretty bad on it, and I got the lowest grade in my class. And my teacher told me I wasn't going to be anything in life because I got a very low grade. The days after that, I remember thinking I couldn't do anything with math, that I was terrible at it. But then my mom transferred me to a new class, a new teacher. I will never forget her because she had a strong impact on my life. What set her apart is when she taught. She would go around to us individually and make sure we were understanding the problems, and she would make it relatable in life. And that's when it changed for me. I hated math with my old teacher. Now I'm studying data sciences, mathematics, and computer science. I'm the only African American person in my class. I want to inspire other African Americans because I was able to do this. There are, of our 600 stories from the uncommissioned, so many that sound like Gabrielle's or Ephraim's, and they are all so powerful. We don't have time to share all of those stories today, but I wanted to just share some of the words that storytellers used across their stories when they were talking about feeling a sense of belonging in STEM, or unfortunately, in many cases, feeling a sense of non belonging. When they felt belonging in their STEM classes, they said things like, I had someone to turn to for help. I was validated. I was seeing or meeting others like me. I found my place. When storytellers talked about not belonging in their STEM classes, they said things like, others assumed I wasn't good at it. I felt isolated, looked down on for my gender, unheard and unseen. Just a little more on what we saw across the 600 uncommissioned stories. 94% of our storytellers discussed feeling a sense of belonging in STEM or feeling like they didn't belong in STEM. Our stories also revealed a positive correlation between feeling a sense of belonging and ultimately pursuing STEM, either in college or in their careers. We also saw that it was often a single event that brought about feelings of belonging. And that one event could often outweigh those other experiences of non-belonging, which you saw in Ephraim's story and Gabrielle's story. We also saw that Black, Native American, and LGBTQ plus storytellers were twice as likely to talk about feeling belonging by identifying with their teacher's race or gender than other storytellers. We also saw how powerful teachers are to influencing belonging for their students. 68% of the time when storytellers reported that shift toward belonging, it was because a teacher made that happen. We saw that storytellers say that teachers fostered belonging 25 percentage points more than any other individual or experience in their lives. And we saw that Black, Native American, and LGBTQ plus storytellers, unfortunately, discussed experiencing teacher racism or sexism twice as often as their other storytellers, meaning that they more often felt that sense of non-belonging in STEM due to teacher actions. And you saw a version of this moonshot goal already, but just to reiterate where we landed as a result of our storytellers, we heard how important teachers were to STEM education, which we already knew, of course, but hearing it from young people, of course, validated this work. And we also heard this idea of belonging coming through loud and clear. And so by 2032, Beyond 100K will be preparing more teachers and retaining more teachers than we did in our first 10 years, focusing particularly on schools serving majority Black, Latinx, and Native American students. We'll also be thinking really deeply about this idea of belonging, both for students and also for their teachers. So we'll be supporting our partners to cultivate those classrooms and workplaces of belonging. This call to action around belonging from storytellers seems both so obvious, but also felt really radical when we landed on it. This focus on belonging, it's not something that we were looking for. It's not something that we expected to hear. But now that we've heard it, we can't look away. So, this call to belonging was so clear to us that last year we took some time to do some research to explore what does this idea of belonging even mean and how does it connect to teachers and what teachers might be doing in their classrooms, especially thinking about Black, Latinx, and Native American students and teachers in particular. So, we read a bunch of articles, we talked to lots of people, and we re examined all of our uncommissioned stories to really get underneath this idea of belonging. So, the last piece of my presentation, I'm going to share with you just some of these takeaways from this work, what we know about belonging right now, and how we might influence it. I also just want to name that so many of you, a lot of this information is maybe not new to you because you see it and experience it every day. We're really excited to hear your thoughts and feedback and what you would add to this work as well. So you saw from Gabrielle and Ephraim's story just how important belonging is to a student's experience. But just to put a finer point on why belonging is so important to student outcomes, the Student Experience Research Network describes that when students are forced to split their attention between addressing their belonging and focusing on a specific learning task at hand, this leads to underperformance and may also increase achievement gaps for minoritized groups like students of color, who more often are going to have that belonging uncertainty or wondering, do I actually belong here in this classroom? Social scientist Claude Steele describes the impact of belonging uncertainty through an analogy. He says, imagine you enter a house and expect to be able to safely relax, but you're told there's a snake in the house. This information would significantly impact your ability to relax, and your entire focus would be on that snake. So, similarly, members of stereotyped groups, like students of color in STEM classrooms, cannot always just relax and focus on the subject matter in front of them. Instead, they must carry that additional cognitive burden of worrying about whether or not they belong in these classrooms. So, through our belonging research process, we heard lots of ways that you can think about what it means to have a sense of belonging in STEM. So, here we kind of synthesized all that we've heard. I want to name that belonging will feel different depending on who you ask, and some people prefer a different term entirely. But broadly, if a person feels a sense of belonging in STEM, they'll feel like they're respected, valued, and accepted by others in their classrooms and schools. And what's really core to this idea is having strong social connections to others around them. If you feel a sense of belonging, you have agency, you feel empowered to make demands of your environment you're in, and not just conform to structures that are already in place. If you feel a sense of belonging, you feel like you can show up and not betray your authentic self. Belonging means you shouldn't have to deny core parts of your identity in order to fit in. If you feel a sense of belonging in STEM, you feel like you can succeed and that you're supported to do so. And finally, if you feel like you belong in STEM, you likely feel a personal connection to STEM. You see a purpose for yourself in the content, and you know you can make a difference using it. Thinking back to the stories that you reflected on of when you felt a sense of belonging or non belonging in STEM, if you felt that belonging, probably a lot of these bullet points showed up in your own experience. So, while belonging is something that is felt internally, we don't mean to imply that students of color need to conform to structures that were not designed for them in order to feel like they belong. In our work to influence belonging, we are emphasizing the processes, practices, and structures that we as a society can put in place to enable conditions that make true and sustainable belonging, especially for Black, Latinx, and Native American students and teachers. So, through our research, we identified several factors that most impact a student's sense of belonging. I'm going to share with you these factors, but I just want to note they are not necessarily exhaustive of all that it takes to create belonging. But what we are going to be doing with our network over the coming years is continuing to build together our collective understanding of what it takes to create these classrooms and workplaces of belonging. So, at a high level, the factors that we found most impact belonging are these: there's institutional factors, instructional factors, mindsets, and teacher belonging. And I'm just going to quickly go into each of these. So, by institutional structures, we're thinking about things like state, district, and school policies, laws, and regulations. And here are just a few ways that institutional structures can foster belonging for students. Research shows that students of color feel a greater sense of belonging when they have teachers with whom they share a racial or cultural identity, or teachers who understand and can connect with that cultural identity. We can also foster belonging for students by rethinking how students are assessed and how teachers are evaluated. Curricula and what courses are taught in schools can either reinforce or undermine students' self perceptions and whether they see themselves in STEM content. Policies like dress codes can celebrate diverse forms of self expression or undermine self expression. And lastly, STEM institutions can sometimes feel quite chilly, especially as students advance in their learning journeys. And so, to better foster belonging, STEM institutions can prioritize creating countercultures of belonging rather than perpetuating that normative, chilly climate surrounding STEM. At the instructional level, we're talking about things like norms, pedagogical tactics, and social dynamics in the classrooms, which you all know so much about. So here's how belonging might manifest instructionally. You all know this already, but this teacher student relationship is so essential to belonging, as belonging results from students feeling seen, heard, valued, and cared for by teachers and others in their schools. And when teachers clearly and passionately connect content to real life, it can help make meaning and lead to a sense of belonging in the subject matter. It's powerful when teachers encourage students of color to explore their racial identity and understand the value of their cultural heritage in positive ways in the classroom, and when possible, how their heritage can directly connect to the content at hand. When teachers implement classroom practices that offer clear and consistent messages about how students can succeed and that they are supported to do so, that can foster belonging for students. And finally, teachers can create a classroom environment in which students are encouraged to foster belonging for each other, as peer to peer relationships can serve as a very important pathway to belonging for students. Mindsets refers to the fact that belonging is sometimes described as a muscle, a skill set, a habit of mind that allows someone to navigate changing external factors and settings. So, some experts describe belonging as something that can be cultivated in oneself and actually developed in students as they progress through their learning careers. For teachers, we also heard many talk about how teachers often benefit from doing their own inner work about their belonging mindset, their beliefs, their racial consciousness. And so we heard that both white teachers and teachers of color benefit from this kind of work, as it's essential for us all to prepare to create a sense of belonging for students of all backgrounds. And finally, we found that teacher belonging is an essential part of student belonging because teachers can best foster belonging in their students when they themselves experience belonging and are able to cultivate it for others. Creating a positive work environment is a powerful way to support teachers to foster belonging. And there are lots of ways to do this, but here are just a few ways that we as a network focus on: valuing teachers as professionals and recognizing their expertise, offering robust collaborative professional learning opportunities, and fostering community so that no teacher feels isolated because of their subject matter or racial identity. The need for belonging is urgent, and we know this from our storytellers and all that is happening around the world. We know that you are living this day in and day out, but we thought it was important to share the reality in which we are seeking to achieve our new moonshot goal. Young Americans are experiencing an acute sense of non-belonging that's been made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. We've heard that teachers are tired and they sometimes are struggling to feel a sense of belonging too, and might then struggle to foster it for their own students. We've heard that this is especially true for Black, Latinx, and Native American students and teachers who experience belonging and non belonging in unique and sometimes extreme ways across all levels of society. Studies have shown that Black and Latinx teachers report experiencing racism, a lack of respect, being given different and extra responsibilities, all reasons why we might see them leaving their jobs at disproportionate rates. And in classrooms, as I mentioned earlier, that belonging uncertainty can lead to an extra cognitive burden for students, and it does impact academic performance. In society as a whole, we see right now that belonging is being challenged by anti truth policies, laws, and practices that undermine and threaten how students and teachers experience and cultivate belonging. And I think that the United States Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, maybe said it best that equity in many ways is under attack. I've shared a lot with all of you, and I wanted to close us out by hearing from you all. After hearing all of what we have learned about belonging and what our storytellers told us, I'd love to hear just in the chat, what are you thinking about doing, starting, stopping, or doing more of that can nourish and deepen environments of belonging in STEM for your students? And as teachers, what do you need to feel a deeper sense of belonging in your schools and STEM? Feel free to answer both of these or one or the other. And thanks, Rochelle. Rochelle shared providing students opportunities to see and hear from folks who are like them. Thank you. Kristen underscored that the part that's often left out is that we, meaning teachers, need to belong too. Our voices need to continue to be heard in advancing STEM, absolutely. Yeah, Nola, I love that. Thinking of ways to help students embrace new students who come into our school later in the school year. Bringing students' voices to the table, absolutely. Creating time and space for students to share their stories. Yeah. I invite you to continue to share ideas in the chat now, and really throughout our day together. And we at Beyond 100K are always open to hearing from all of you with your continued ideas about how we can do this work better too. I just wanted to end with a little bit more about what we are going to be doing as a network. So, our next 2 years, meaning the first 2 years of our next decade ahead, we have a few things that we are working on. We are approaching this moonshot goal in an achievable series of milestones. So, by 2025, we are hoping to grow our network even more. We have 130 partners right now. We want to grow that even more to 200. By 2025, we also will have co-created a map of underlying causes of the inequitable STEM teacher workforce and identified high impact opportunities for change. And we will have made progress toward our 150,000 teacher preparation goal, preparing at least 20,000 new STEM teachers in our nation's classrooms. We'll make this happen through all sorts of network activities like our Moonshot collaboratories or collabs, which are small groups of partners that are coming together over the course of these next couple years to experiment, problem solve, and design really specific focus areas of our work. And all the work that's happening with our partners will influence how we innovate and experiment with improving our model. We're excited to continue to build on the work of our first 10 years and also change as is needed to really make sure that we're making an even deeper impact in these next 10 years. I am so, so grateful for the time that I had with each of you. I'm inspired by the work that you all do every single day, and I'm really excited to continue the conversation with each of you throughout today and beyond that. I also just want to plug my colleague, Pomai Verzan. We'll be hosting a session later today that's focused on a specific facet of our work, our mapping work, which is all about mapping out the biggest challenges that are underlying our new moonshot goal. And so, if you're interested in digging more deeply into our work and our moonshot and our challenges specifically, I encourage you to jump into her session. Thank you all again so, so much for your time. I am honored to have been able to kick things off with you all, and I'm just so excited to be learning alongside you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. What a great way for us to kick off our entire day with grounding ourselves in that work. Just awesome. And I don't know about many of you, but there's a lot of information in there that made me stop and reflect to think about what can I do to help bring in a sense of belonging with those other colleagues in my community. So, and their students as well, certainly. But that's really cool. But I think we should do some little bit of networking and kind of chat and unpack what we're thinking a little bit. What do you say, Kristen?
Absolutely. Before I get to the next quick bit of housekeeping things, there was a question in the chat at the top of Teresa's presentation about if she's willing to share slides out. So we'll certainly have that conversation with Teresa, and I'm sure she's willing to share parts of her presentation out. I know there's so much good content in there, and there's so many great conversations happening in the chat right now that we want to give folks a little bit of time to have some table talk. But before we do that, just two quick housekeeping things. So first, for those of you that are on Twitter, we invite you to be tweeting all day long about our event using the hashtag STEM for all, literally STEM, the number 4, and then all. I've already started, so if you get on that hashtag on Twitter, you can jump on and continue the conversations that we're having there. This will be also important for those of us later on who will be needing to make some really tough decisions about which concurrent session should we go to. I know that Teresa just put in a plug for her colleague Pomai, and we have so many other fantastic sessions planned this afternoon. It'll be difficult to choose, but if you get on Twitter and people tweet, you can hear about what happens in those other rooms. So I'm going to drop right now into the chat our Google Doc that has the overview of what you'll be able to select from later on today. Starting at 1:10, we will all be returning here for the next presentation that Diane and I will be delivering on characteristics of rockstar STEM teaching. And then from there, we will move into 2 sets of concurrent sessions. So we are going to pause the presentation mode right now and allow you to have some table talk time. And then we will be reconvening at 1:10 for another presentation right here in the main room.
See you in the tables.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. We hope you've had some really great conversations at your tables. And one of the cool features about these little rooms, I can tell everybody's talking because of the little icons that flash like that. And so there's a lot of flashing going on around the room, Diane. It made me happy.
It's really some great things that are happening in here. And best word of all is that, we're having this conversation around engaging our students, engaging our colleagues into really jumping into powerful things for STEM education. And, that helps me kind of remember is that we've got some information on how we can define, or what we know is information around rockstar STEM education.
Absolutely. So we are going to kick off this main room presentation right now with our session on the characteristics of rockstar STEM teaching. And so first, shout out to all of the VOYA STEM fellows who are in the room, and our thanks to VOYA for funding our work. Again, my name's Kristen Record, and if you've got your phone out there, you can see how you can tweet at me during this session. Diane?
Yes.
All
We are definitely using that STEM for all experience, but I hope you're sharing some goodness out there today. But just a quick reminder, I'm Diane Smokorowski. I am the coordinator of digital literacy in Wichita, Kansas, as involved in that K-12, but I come from a middle school language arts, believe it or not. So we talk often about how STEM education really focuses into the science, tech, engineering, and math, but it really is a mindset on how we teach in helping students embrace failure or take academic risks and so forth. And Kristen, if you want a quick recall.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I couldn't help thinking during Teresa's presentation about the fact that I'm a female physics teacher with a degree in physics. And when I've been engaging with Beyond 100K's work, I have spent a lot of time reflecting on my own learning environments as a young woman who was often the only woman in a room of men earning a degree in physics. And it was only maybe about 10 years ago before I personally started engaging with other women who were also physics teachers. I was always used to being the only girl in the room. And with that, while we're here, we know that people are joining from all sets of sites and locations. When we pivot into some table talk, Diane and I just want you to try to have your camera on if you're able to. We'll be going back and forth. Diane will try to monitor the chat for us while we're doing. So please question, use the chat. And when you're in table talk mode, please, please, please become your own facilitators, because your participation in this virtual space is needed to make all of our time equitable and valuable. So first, ask of you to share in the chat box. When you envision a rockstar STEM teacher, what do you see in your mind? Who are they? What characteristics do they have? How do you know that someone is a rock star STEM teacher? Go ahead and share that in the lab coats. Only if they're geeky and colorful ones.
Exciting ones. Animated people bring in the excitement, absolutely. And I know there's a lot of passionate STEM educators. Especially if you get that critter that kind of walks into the classroom, whether it be a cricket in the fall, or you have something that's, growing in the windows or something, and the STEM educators are like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever.
And I want to call out what Shannon shared about bringing your full authentic self into the classroom, how important that is, the curiosity factor, the failing forward factor. Yeah, so there's so many things that come to mind when you envision this exemplary STEM educator. So we went out as part of the VOYA STEM Fellow, and we did a little bit of our own action research and polling. Within our fellowship group, we have over 24 educators, PK through higher education, that have all been STEM teachers. And we went out to all of our networks and we interviewed over 2,000 people across the country, asking them this same exact question. And you can see on this slide many of the things that were just placed into that chat box. So I saw Steve Elza, you said building those positive relations. So many people said creativity, hands-on learning, curiosity, and Braden already talked to us about risk taking and failing forward. Shannon's comment that they made about bringing your true authentic self, that's willing to be vulnerable. So all of these characteristics were ones that continue to shine through in the interviews that we did with educators across the country. And what we did is we took our work and we divided out by who said these things, who was a practicing classroom teacher in a school working with kids, and what did administrators or those people that are in higher ed, so perhaps those people that are working in teacher prep programs, what did they think? And what we thought was super interesting is that there was so much crossover between the most important characteristics overall. So we shared the characteristics on the slide that you just saw, and we asked people to identify what were their top 3. And this is what came out for teachers and then administrators and higher ed. What's super interesting is that, of course, it was the teachers, and mind you, this was done before the pandemic. So we were already SELing as an important thing before the pandemic. Look right there on the bottom of the teacher list is a champion for students and strong positive relationships. We were there before SEL became a thing during and after the pandemic. And our administrator said those 4 C's are foundational, but otherwise we had a lot of crossover with this. So the first thing that we would like you to discuss at your table is, why is it that these characteristics are so important? Why is there a little bit maybe of a difference between teachers and administrator? What could account for that? So we are going to invite you to chat at your tables for about maybe 8 or 9 minutes, and then we're going to call you back for a full group share.
A lot of those pieces at our table as well, but we're very curious to know if anyone from your tables would like to share. We'd like to bring you up on the stage, virtual stage, and have you share what was happening in your conversations. You should be able to raise your hand if you can look for that piece, and if you have a question or like to share, just raise your hand and we'll bring you up on the stage. I saw lots of activity happening at those tables, so I know there were some great conversations.
I think somebody needs to be a risk taker.
And if you cannot see where to raise your hand, you can just put that in the chat as well. Click the more on your control panel, and then you'll see the raise hand option. There we go. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, how are you? I'll jump out and be the risk taker, I guess. I'm not.
Yay.
Thank you.
I love my table because we were all over the place discussing this. One of the things that came forward was really the lens in which you're approaching STEM. And some of the differences that we were talking about had to do with really systems and structures that are in place already, that we're trying to break those barriers, right? That's a lot of what our VOYA conversations have been. It's a lot about what we do as teachers and empowered leaders is to change those conversations. And we had a big discussion around data and how data informs that and how we use it. I think it really is breaking down the walls, and we have to be that voice. And it's frustrating. We all were talking about how we've been challenged in that role, but at the same time, we're still making baby steps or large steps ahead with it. And it was wonderful to share some of those ideas to see what was happening when we were talking about, well, this is what's in the administrator column, and this is why it may be in the teachers, and here's maybe why that's happening. And I think the biggest benefit here to sit at a table with our colleagues was that we all have different roles we play beyond educator, whether that be a curriculum developer or somebody that's working with our association. And all of those things played into discussing what those two columns meant.
Perfect. Thank you. That was a great conversation at the table. Gosh, I wish I could have peeked in and popped in, but thank you for sharing. Very cool. And anyone else would like to share? Looks like some good things were happening at Haley's table.
I think Haley volunteered her thought partner to come up next.
We'd love to hear, Angelique. And maybe Haley would be willing to pop up and share as well.
Yeah, come on up, Haley. Haley Bull, here you come.
Hey, Haley. Hey.
Hi.
So it was really great talking to Angelique. She was, she's getting her master's degree right now, and her focus is on how, I'm going to really just put this in a tiny box here, but how we can get more kids into STEM who are also our special education students.
He's the math teacher, right?
Yes.
I saw you, Angelique. Yes.
Yeah. And she's just doing awesome work with kids, trying to, and admin, and trying to figure out how we can make sure that they are getting the same access to the same rigorous coursework, and figuring out ways that we can fit them in. Because one of the things she said that I loved was like, STEM is so everything. It's, you know, it's so layered. We don't have to have smart kids only, because that's not a real, I can't remember the exact word, but it's essentially really isolating, because we have these kids who have these abilities that a lot of our other students who are considered smart don't have, just because they have these different disabilities that, what did she say? It's that we don't want to figure out the ways to teach them and help them. It's that it's too hard for us. It's not that it's too hard for them. So I was really impressed with everything she was saying, and the ways that she's working to make sure that our SPED kids are getting the STEM education that all of our kids deserve. So anyway, if you guys all have a second to talk to her, pop into her table later, because she's got really great ideas and has great questions for everybody as well. So.
Ooh, I am excited to get into her table then. Yeah. That's wonderful. And as Steve said in the chat box, there are all different kinds of smarts. Mm-hmm. And you as an educator, we as teachers, we figure that out by getting to know our kids. Mm-hmm. And that's where that building the strong, positive relationship comes from. So if you're going to be able to elevate those unique voices that have a different kind of smartness.
Exactly.
You have to know your kids and build that relationship in order for that to be able to happen.
Yes. And I think Angelique would totally agree with you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There she is posting in the chat. We're honored to have you. All right. Shall we continue from here?
Yes, we shall. Okay. So after we shopped through our list of amazing STEM characteristics of rockstar STEM teachers and asked people to identify what was the most important overall, we then asked everyone to identify off the list which are the hardest to teach a teacher to do well. And notice how completely different sets of these rockstar STEM characteristics came out. And so there is some crossover again with what is hard to teach a teacher to do well. But there's some things that are unique to what teachers think and what administrators and those in higher ed think. So again, this came off of our list as something that these are highly desirable characteristics, but they're also very hard to hone these characteristics. So what we're going to ask you to do next is to pop back into your, actually I'm off on our slides. I apologize. What we then did was we took the Venn diagram of which are most valuable for a teacher to be able to do and which are the hardest to do well. And we Venn diagrammed them into the overlapping areas and developed this list of the characteristics of a rockstar STEM teacher. So most valued and hardest to teach a teacher to do well. And what the STEM Fellows then did is we began building out learning activities and professional development that would enable STEM educators to move their practice from good to great in the teaching field by developing these 7 characteristics that are up here on your screen right now. So our ask of you at the moment is we are already assuming that you yourself are a rockstar STEM educator. And we're going to send you back to your tables to discuss which of these skills is your superpower right now and how did you develop that skill in yourself. All right, so we'll send you back to your tables to discuss that.
And friends, I'm dropping the link in the chat so that if you want to
And Diane just muted herself on accident. So I think what she's saying is she's dropping the link into the chat so that if you would reference the list while you are having this table talk discussion, you have it right there for you. Hi, everyone. Hope you had some fantastic conversations about those characteristics that you have as your personal superpower right now. We have about 4 minutes or so left in our presentation time slot. So I'd love to hear from 1 or 2 of you about the way that you were able to develop one of those rockstar characteristics. Who would love to raise their hand and come up on stage with me?
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm Angelique. Nice to meet you, Kristen. I love your shirt. It looks like a NASCAR shirt, but I love that you have the teacher on it because we move fast.
Oh, very good. I'm so happy you're joining me up here. So tell us about what rockstar STEM characteristic is in your wheelhouse and how did you get it?
My rockstar teacher gift, or is in my wheelhouse, is talking to Kristen about why Kristen why you're so amazing. I have a tendency to ask more questions. The inquiry learning that I was trained to do as a substitute teacher was understanding by design. The more questions we ask, the less we work, the less we're burnt out, and the less we need to be the smartest person in the room. When any student asks you a question, I want you to ask another question. I don't want you to ask a demeaning question or ask them why you're asking that question. I want you to say, what do you think about that? Why do you care? How does that affect you? And I want us to stop giving answers. We're giving them answers to think like robots when we actually want to learn about robots that actually don't think like humans.
Mm-hmm.
The more questions we have, the more questions they will come up with, and the more they will learn on their own at their own learning levels. And we need to ask each other, hey, I need some help. I need some help. And I think I just learned that with one of my colleagues, Miss Bull. And she is also a talent at asking questions. She immediately bounces them off like a boomerang in Australia. I think she is great at it. And I think she's a rock star for shouting me out. But I want to tell teachers, understanding by design is a concept that we all know about. It's Montessori. What do you think? Why do you care? And how can we make it real? So that is my characteristic, is asking questions. And I hope that other people will ask me some questions because I'd like to ask you some back.
Wow, that is just so profound because you just went through and exemplified how to be curious, engage in an inquiry process, encourage people to take a risk, not only by asking a good question, but by taking a risk by answering a good question. And if you're the educator in the room that's fostering that good questioning environment, it only happens if you have built the classroom culture in the proper, deliberate way that allows it to happen. You just cannot walk into a classroom and just expect that to naturally happen. You have to work hard to hone that and model it, scaffold it, so that eventually that just becomes the expectation, and your kids drive the conversation themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you for noticing my question. And thank you for recognizing that you're questioning the idea of what is good teaching. I love your question. Thank you for letting me talk to you.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you up on the stage. Carly Bowen, you cannot clap fast enough. That's great. Shannon.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for bringing me up. So the piece that I think I fell into the most quickly that allowed me to be successful was the part about being authentic and connecting with industry and community members that were doing things related to the content that I was teaching. Because I saw that connection and I knew those people, I could bring them in and model that curiosity and that enthusiasm and excitement, model questioning, and those professionals from the community valued my perspective, valued my students enough to involve them in projects, to really create so much more meaning for the work that was being done. We weren't just doing a project in the classroom that just stayed in those four walls. We were doing something that connected to the broader community that these adults valued. So they valued my students and their efforts, and that just elevated their work.
And then you and your kids found belonging because adults outside of your school found value in them and what they were doing. And you've just encapsulated everything we have been talking about for the past almost 2 hours now. Thank you, Shannon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, and there's a shout out in the chat for from Rachel. We're going to be talking more about that in the high school session that will be in your breakout options. So once again, I am going to drop into the chat box our options for the next round of sessions. We will be taking about an 8-minute break and kick off a breakout session 1 at 2:05. So the VOYA STEM Fellows spent a year working through how to get kids engaged in thinking about STEM careers. We published and released grade banded STEM career engagement guides. And we have 3 presentations for you, one each specifically honed to elementary teachers and students, middle school teachers and students, and high school teachers and students. You will notice from the breakout sessions, if you are interested in attending the elementary session, you will stay right here in the main building. You don't have to do anything. We'll be starting that presentation at 2:05. If you are interested in either the middle school or high school presentation about engaging kids and thinking about STEM careers, you are going to transition to a new virtual building. What you're going to do is on the top of your screen, when we are back into table mode, you will see that there is a menu up on top that says Event Map. You are currently in the main room. You can then select to move yourself to either building 2 or building 3, and you will get a whole new virtual environment to explore. It will literally look different. You will have a different set of table arrangements. We encourage you to find a table and move yourself around so that you have people to chat with. All of the presentations are designed to be interactive and collaborative. So in the next, now we have 7 minutes. Yes, 7 minutes. Feel free to take a break, turn your camera off, move yourself to whichever room you want. Again, elementary teachers, stay right here. Educators for middle school and high school, you'll be swapping buildings. And the event map is just above my image here, according to Jim from iBreakthrough. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you in one of the sessions that are starting at 2:05 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I go ahead and jump in and get started. So I just want to welcome you all to my presentation. Today I'm going to be talking about using a practitioner model to infuse inquiry into skill-based laboratory activities. I am a PhD student at Texas A&M University, and this is some work that I've done as like a conglomeration of various things that I've learned so far in my PhD program. So first of all, we're going to compare the experiences students can have in a traditional cookbook lab versus an inquiry lab. So oftentimes what you'll see is the challenge question or some challenge statement will initiate the inquiry, such as, can you make a parachute? There are often materials just listed out. What do you need? Well, this is all the things that I need. There's a recipe of instructions. Students just can follow this and get through it. It then asks students, well, what have you learned? So let's ask ourselves for a moment, what do you think students will learn from this? Do you think they'll learn science concepts? If so, what concepts do you think they'll learn? What other things might they be learning? Maybe science is boring, I'm bad at science, or science is hard. So now let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about the pros and cons of a cookbook versus an inquiry activity. So there are maybe some good things to some more cookbook or traditional style laboratory activities. We know that they're faster or more efficient for students to get through, which might be good for the teacher as well if like we need to just have a very easily managed lab activity and it might be something to scaffold students into something more complex. These activities will also emphasize more basic science process skills like observing, measuring, predicting, and inferring. There usually are no overt connections, though, between science concepts and the actual things they're doing in the lab activity. This will result in less mental engagement and less deliberate thinking on the student's part. On the other hand, the inquiry-infused lab activity, they might take a little bit longer, but they're going to emphasize basic and integrated science process skills. So we're going to get through all of these basic skills, but we're also going to get into some more advanced skills like controlling variables, deciding how we're going to measure these variables. Maybe we're going to formulate some hypotheses. We're going to do some experiments, and we're going to interpret data. So in these activities, there will usually be overt connections happening between these science process skills and content. And usually there is much more mental engagement happening because students actually have to make some decisions. They have to say, okay, what variables are we going to control, and etc. So now, drumroll please, my practitioner model is intending to infuse inquiry into skill-based labs. So the foundation of this model is that skills are very important, but it's just not enough. So we all know that the S in TEACS, which is the Texas Education, Knowledge, and Skills, the S stands for skills. So we're aware that skills are very important in science learning, but doing something that is skill-based, usually more traditional style cookbook lab, is not enough to get students at a very deep conceptual understanding of science. What we need to do is we need inquiry and mental engagement. Very much so, yeah. Science and engineering practices, yes. Also, it helps us to infuse inquiry into skill-based labs because these can take that science content piece and that skills piece, and it merges them together because we're engaging our minds. The purpose of my intention for making this practitioner model is to increase the accessibility that teachers can have to implement inquiry, because we know that there are many barriers to inquiry in our teaching practice. So I'm hoping that this will help reduce or remove some of those barriers by synthesizing a lot of the research-based ideas that I've learned into one, hopefully, coherent package. Ultimately, I'm hoping that this will move inquiry-based science teaching toward STEM for all. So here is my 4-phase practitioner model, and in each phase, there is an inquiry element. So I'm just going to briefly talk about these in the next few slides. So in our first phase, we're going to have pre-lab discussions. So also I should note that depending on the actual lab activity that you're going to be doing, you might not need all of these elements, but this is meant to be as widely usable and adapting as you need it to be for whatever you may be working on. So it might not all apply to you and what you're trying to do, but for others, it might more apply for every element to be covered. So pre-lab discussions might include things about safety. And so to make this inquiry driven, instead of saying, let's tie our hair back when working with flames, we're going to ask a question so that students can think, well, why do we need to tie our hair back when working with open flames? Well, that could be pretty bad, right? So also, this is usually in the more complicated activities, we'll do a demo of key steps so that students might see how it's done before they need to do it. Also, this is usually when we review prior knowledge to bring those ideas out to the forefront of their minds. In the second phase, we're going to perform the lab. And in this phase, we're going to always be mindful of our good teacher behaviors. And we can also do some little things like make a question sheet to accompany a lab that's already made for us. And we can also look at the materials that we might be using. And in this way, we are moving ourselves toward a more inquiry-infused lab activity. In the third phase, this is when we have done the lab, so now we're going to talk about it. So usually this is better facilitated whenever we can have students do smaller discussions in smaller groups. And then we're going to bring that out into the big whole class discussion where we can have various things that we want to talk about. And so maybe all of these wouldn't be you might not have time for it, and that's okay. We can always address these in the fourth phase. So in the fourth phase, this is when we're going to assess what students have learned. So whenever this happens in the normal scheme of your semester or term or whatever the word is, we're going to ask activity-related questions on the exams and quizzes because this will implicitly emphasize the importance of the science concepts and process skills that they have done in the lab. So in this model, there's actually connections to teaching models and learning theories. So I'm going to go over those now. The learning cycle is involved because exploration occurs in phase 2. There's concept development here in phase 3, where we try to scaffold students to the desired understandings based on what we've done in the lab, but we're going to get them to those science concepts through this concept development phase. Then we're going to also in there, we're going to do some application. So we're going to apply things to the real world because that will make a deeper, potentially longer lasting form of knowledge. Developmental learning theory is involved in all of the phases because we're going to consider the developmental level of our students when we're choosing the science content and or the activity that we're doing. Also, you will notice that in phase 2, this is a very concrete, we're actually doing the lab, we're interacting with things, it's very concrete. And then we're going to progress into phase 3, which is more discussion. So we're getting more abstract. We're talking about concepts and definitions and applying our knowledge to other contexts. Constructivist learning theory is involved in phase 1, where we are going to review prior knowledge. And in doing so, usually this will help us know and diagnose what students' misconceptions are, which is very important because oftentimes in phase 3 here, we're going to need to utilize conceptual change to basically replace those misconceptions with actual factual science ideas. Social learning theory is involved in all of the phases that would happen in the classroom. So in phases 1 through 3, students will have the opportunity to learn from more knowledgeable peers. So somebody may have an answer to a safety question that, oh, well, I didn't think about that. So that can happen throughout the lab. And also in phase 3, we're going to have small group and whole class discussion. And so there's a lot of zones of proximal development being like overlapping and involving with each other. And lastly, behavioral learning theory. So the science process skills would be involved in phases 1 and 2 whenever we're talking about the lab before we do it and in doing the lab. And then whenever we're doing the third phase, we're also going to be involving our effective teacher behaviors. And that should really be throughout all of these 3 phases. So we're going to make sure we're using good wait time 1, which is waiting after we ask a question, and good wait time 2, which is after students say something before we say something. We're going to use inviting and encouraging nonverbals. So we're going to have very positive and happy facial expressions. We're going to have welcoming hand gestures. We're going to have a nice inviting intonation and other things. We're going to ask open-ended, thought-provoking questions and try to avoid those yes-no dichotomous questions. We're going to incorporate students' ideas into the discussion because that lets them know that yes, we're interested in what you have to say and all ideas are welcome. And asking for elaboration and clarification when students respond will help us actually know what students mean. Like we can, instead of assuming, well, I know what you mean here, we're going to have them tell us because that also is a good form of mental engagement for students to have to hone what they have to say. So to highlight a little bit about phase 2 with a question sheet, there is, let's just recall for a moment, in the traditional cookbook lab activity, all the things were listed out, and we were wondering, what are students going to learn here? So imagine what this would be like if we added a question sheet. Automatically, we are entering an inquiry-driven space because these questions are going to have students think. So there are several key features, and these are actually pedagogical considerations about this question sheet. So first, we're going to notice that the safety considerations have to be followed. It is not a suggestion, but other things in the lab can be changed based on how the students feel they want to investigate. Which leads us into our goal for this lab is to investigate something, right? So we know that Bloom's verbs are kind of how we think about science and learning. And so we want to investigate the science of parachutes instead of the other one when we were saying, who can build a parachute, right? So these open-ended questions here are going to help guide students' thinking toward desired understandings. So these questions target key concepts like, so what is the purpose of the paper clip that you are going to be using to build a parachute? Why are you doing certain steps? What connections does this have to science concepts in what you're doing? Sorry. These questions then will serve as a guide for phase 3 discussions. And the purpose of all of this is to get students thinking. Also, we can consider the materials. The materials themselves in a lab can constrain how much students are going to think. So, for example, in a cookbook lab, we're going to tell students to cut 11-inch pieces of string. But in an inquiry-driven way, we can encourage students to investigate string length if they want to. If they feel like this will help them in their investigation of parachutes, then they can go ahead and do that. Excuse me. Also, we will note that the supply of materials might be more for an inquiry lab than for a cookbook lab, but we can choose to use very affordable materials. Sorry, I guess I'm not used to talking this much. We're going to use very affordable materials and very simple but concrete materials. So in this simple idea, we want to avoid using unnecessarily complicated materials because that complicated entity can actually get in the way of students' understanding. So we can try to scaffold students from something more simple, like a plastic cup, to something more complex, like a glass beaker. So the key points here is that the most effective form of inquiry pedagogy actually confuse effective teacher behaviors with these small changes that we can make to the activity. And we want to make sure we do both. So this can also showcase that science process skills can shine alongside science content if we engage students in a simple form of inquiry by doing one or all of these changes that are relatively small steps in isolation that can lead to huge impacts in student learning. And if our goals for the students are that they acquire lifelong skills and deeply understand science content, we have to infuse inquiry into our activities. And this model is based on various literature, and they're listed here. So thank you, everyone. And my email address is below. And if you have any questions, you can type it in the Q&A or even raise your hand and then ask it to the whole room. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. All right, I'm excited. I don't necessarily know if it's the four of us or if there's others here in the room already. Yes, you get down at the bottom. And then there's the slides, so we should be good to go. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Rin, since you got the slides, you want to go ahead and jump in?
Me? Yes, all right. Welcome. We are the elementary branch of the VOYA STEM group, and we help to create this career guide, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm going to be moving the slides, so if you don't see something, are people able to jump in the chat to let us know if there's a problem with anything? Hopefully.
Yes, and I'll keep an eye on that too.
Okay. All right. So with that, we will get started with our goal is just to introduce the our career engagement guide so that you can use it to get STEM guests into the classroom, because we've all done it and we found it very valuable. So we want to talk about what we found helped to do that so that you can do it too. And these will be your presenters. Most of us are here today that worked on this. So really, we feel like elementary STEM sparks curiosity. They're still not, jaded enough yet where they're afraid to fail. So this is a perfect time to introduce them to STEM and also to see where it can take them. And then we'll be sharing on this Padlet throughout. We'll put a link in the chat so that when we ask a question, you'll be able to share your answers in the Padlet. Because we want to hear about your past experiences connecting STEM guests to your classroom as well. So we'll be putting that link in there. So when we ask a question, you can actually share, we can collaborate on this Padlet, and you'll have access to it after we finish. And there's also a QR code there if the link isn't working for you. Leanne, did you want to?
Oh, I just dropped in there. Should be good.
Sorry. Okay. So you, so one of the first questions or one of the first responses on our Padlet is having you share some of your past experiences that you've had connecting STEM guests to your classroom. Have they been virtual experiences? Have you been able to have, people come in and talk to your students? What does that look like? And so what we want you to do is on the Padlet, if you would just spend, a minute or so putting some of your ideas in that first column of past experiences of connecting STEM guests to your classroom. And to get some thoughts flowing with that, and then we'll be jumping into some of course, some of the things that we have been doing. But we know that we've got lots of STEM rock stars in our session with us, so we'd like to see if there's something that you would like to share with us.
Absolutely. And you may also be like me and be more of the new guy, because I'm over here just in year 6. So before last year, I had never done this before. And so I'm excited to share a little bit about my failing forward with that I had to. So you may not have anything to add as well, and that is totally okay. But yeah, that first column, if you've ever had a guest speaker come to you or, video-wise, anything like that, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll keep this Padlet going throughout. You can see there's a few columns there. So if anything pops in your head to add in, we're happy to have it. And then we'll try to capture this to hold on to for all of us as well. So, and then I think there's a couple of people, Kristen might be trying to help out. I believe up at the top of the screen, there's that event map button. And if you click that, it kind of gives you a little drop down for rooms 2 and 3. So if you are not here for elementary, you need to go to middle school or high school, you can find them over there. I'm biting my tongue not to say anything about, elementary being the best over here, since we don't have Anthony, one of our family comedians over here, so got some big shoes to fill with him.
All right. Well, Cameron, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And people can still, if they choose to, add some things to the Padlet. So thinking about lessons or units that you teach that could benefit from having a STEM guest, and it can be across any content area that you might be thinking about to have a guest speaker come into your classroom. An example, as the instructional technology coordinator in the district that I work in, we've had some awesome opportunities to have some engineers from around our local communities here in Northern Nevada be able to come in and talk about, how do they use computer science in the work that they do? What kind of science and math skills do they need? We've had them come in at the elementary level as well as some of our engineering classes, at the high school level as well. So across the board, I'm hoping that everybody in this room is, specific to elementary, but what might that look like for you? And I know my colleagues have lots of examples as well.
Yes, I would say my example is using when we're studying the Earth's atmosphere in, say, grade 6, and I had some of the wise women come in from the Department of Atmospheric Pressure, and they would I had about 3 or 4 of them talk to our group about their Earth's atmosphere, but also about their careers. And as they were starting out being either weather women or in different capacities that each of them were partaking in.
And then I last year actually was in 3rd grade instead of 4th, and we learned a lot about space. And so we had a astronomer Skype with us, and I do have some more to share about that later because there were some failing forward moments in that for me as the teacher. But that was a really cool one. This year and next year, I know I'm teaching 4th grade, and we do a lot of animal adaptations. And just thinking, I don't know quite where to start with that one yet, but I was just thinking, I feel like that's one. You get some cool people and some really interesting and fun things in there. So I went ahead and threw that one up on the Padlet too.
And if I can piggyback off of Tim, one great connection for the city of Philadelphia is that we use the Philadelphia Zoo is literally down the street from my school. So we always have them, we have a close connection with them, and they come in quite often to partner to talk about animal adaptations with the students.
And I guess I'll jump in. We had, they were studying hydroponics, just different ways of, sustainable growing things, and had an expert on hydroponics and aquaponics meet with us virtually. And the kids were so engaged during it and just learned so much. And we recorded it when thankfully we did, because this year, he was unavailable because he was having a baby that week that we needed him. And we played it back, and the kids still thought that he was there. It was like he was still alive. So it was a great experience for them to have an expert, and gave some kids some ideas of some careers that they might be interested in later, and how ways to use those science and math skills they were learning.
I'm also just going to point out I'm very distracted by the Padlet now because someone is saying that Matt Denton from the UK, who is one of the robotics designers of BB-8, that's super cool. And that's, when you start really exploring into this, and, it kind of opens up a whole new world, and, you find people that are passionate about, changing lives and getting more people into STEM, especially at such a young age with elementary kids. And when you can find those really cool things, that just opens the door for so many students to things that they didn't even know existed out in the world, and just opens up so many opportunities for them, as they move on up into middle and high school, and can set a lot of big goals for them. So that's a really cool one. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Cameron, if you want to keep on moving.
Okay. We'll move on. Let me get back over there.
All right, so we're going to take a look over at our guide. So I think it was, as Kristen was saying earlier, we worked over the past year or two about kind of putting this into practice ourselves and learning from our mistakes and what worked and what didn't work, and kind of compiling that all into a document that we could share out. And so that's kind of led us to where we are today, kind of getting to show you, talk to you about it, what worked, what didn't work, and then have a conversation about how, you can really apply it in your own classroom moving into the next school year.
So this is our guide that we're going to kind of go through today. And we're going to we're going to put a link. You can find this on the site. And are we also putting a link in the chat to this guide?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. So that we're going to go through it and kind of point out some important places. We're going to start with Skype a Scientist here. But there are so many great resources that we have used in our classroom. And looking at that example, I'm excited like Tim is about the BB-8 example, the person who designed that, because there are people out there everywhere. And we're going to talk about connections later, but that's part of the guide too. And so we'll go through it step by step, point out some things, but hopefully if you have questions about something, I can add a place to the Padlet for questions as well. So who is leading through the Skype a Scientist demo? I can do it if we don't have.
If you want to click through and I can talk through it, that's actually how I ended up getting my astronomer. So
okay, so I'm going to click Skype a Scientist, which is on the guide as we spoke about.
Mm-hmm. So if you scroll down, there's a few cool things on this website that are right on this page. If you go down, sorry, too far. There's a Get Started button up there. I believe you got to click that one first.
Oh yeah, Get Started.
And then I think it's this one. If you scroll down, instead of clicking on teachers, if you scroll down first, there's a cool section right here that kind of talks you through those two boxes right there, Cameron, if you go up just a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, you're good. So that teachers, groups, and families, it kind of talks through a little bit about things to think about and different things you can use. And that first one, Cameron, yeah, if you'll click on that first link there.
So this is the scientists can be browsed.
Yep. So the first cool tool that's on here is this is actually basically a whole database of different scientists that you can reach out to and the things that they do. Up at the top right there where Cameron's mouse is, there's different languages that you can click through. And then over on the right, there's that search bar. So if you type in a subject that maybe you're teaching about, you'll use that keyword to kind of pull up different scientists that are specializing in those certain things.
Oh, I picked one that's not. There we go.
So yeah, so for example, perfect biology, and then it's going to automatically pull up some biologists. So that's one cool tool there. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can actually see there's like tons of pages here. So all the way, I don't know if yours shows it like mine did this morning, but it showed like 100 some pages worth of scientists. So there's
1,048 entries.
Yeah, there you go. So, and then Cameron, if you go back to that page that we were just on, sorry to make you jump around. And then that next one is sign up using this form. So that's a little bit overwhelming to see all those scientists in one place. But this is a form that you can fill out. This is exactly how I found mine when I did it. And so you fill out, there's a lot of information to fill out. It is really neat in the sense that it is very inclusive. So it asks a lot of different information. And they can also try to go through and match. So if you want a scientist that, matches the demographic of your own students, which I know a lot of us are, passionate about and find the importance of that, this tool can help you do that. And so then again, that big list of all the different scientists that they have, grade level, things like that. The one thing that I will say, and this is a little bit of that failing forward I was talking about when I did this, is this was actually my very first time doing this and bringing a speaker into my classroom. And I did not do a whole lot of pre-planning, and we'll talk more about this in a bit, but I learned that whenever I'm just given the scientist here and I say, okay, here's what we're going to do, here's the time and place, and then no other planning, it may not go as smoothly as you want. And so, like I said, we'll jump into that a little bit more. But this was an excellent resource. I was able to find somebody so easily. This is just one of many that we've got linked in there. And then, of course, if you have personal connections, I had a friend who was an optometrist that also spoke to my kids. And that one was more just for fun, just for the exposure of another career that, they might not have thought about prior to. So that is Skype a Scientist.
And I'd like to jump in on the next two links that are in our guide, just because those are two that I worked with a couple of fifth grade computer science teachers. The Google Computer Science Ignite experience, you used to be able to have Google computer scientists be able to virtually, you could set up a Zoom and have them be a part of your class. It had originally come about during National Computer Science Education Week, which is the first week in December of every year. They no longer have the actual live streams where, they don't have the folks that will actually be able to Zoom for your students to ask questions, but they have some great recordings of sessions that they've done in the past. So I would still highly recommend, if you are teaching computer science, to please check that link out. And then the other one is the Amazon Future Engineer class chats, and that was amazing as well. All sorts of STEM related jobs that Amazon has. And so they have a whole program with their employees about, how to be able to share experiences that they have with their work around, STEM fields. And I think the thing that was the most impressive about all of these, we had 4 different Amazon engineers participate in this, and they all started out with their experiences in elementary school. What was something that sparked their interest, when they were in 3rd or 4th grade, and then how did they carry that, through as they went to middle school, high school, and then on to college. So that is another wonderful resource around, computer science and engineering in general.
And I'm showing this site where you can do the real world exploration, or like she was talking about the computer science courses, look at the elementary offerings.
Thanks, Cameron.
And those are all linked on our Finding STEM Professionals links here. Skype a Scientist, the Ignite she mentioned, Future Engineer. There are also others like the National Park Rangers, WISE, Women in Science and Engineering, and Edutainment. And I believe at this point we were going to do the Padlet where they could find a resource. Am I ahead of this? Find a resource you can use and share it out on the Padlet.
Before you talk about that, Camera, I wanted to just add and give my plug for the WISE Women in Science.
Okay, let me click on that so we can talk about it. There we go.
Only because our dear Rachel Peterson is also a STEM fellow. She helped guide me through a couple of the presentations that I also did with my students. It was also virtual, and it was great in that, like Tim, I have done some of the kind of unscripted gatherings with my students, and it didn't go as planned. But with Rachel and her help, she was also able to kind of navigate talking to the people that they had come to speak to us before they presented, so that it kind of helped give our class a more centralized way of talking to the presenters. And I had the students ask, type up questions before, and then we had the presentations ready to go. So she's a wealth of knowledge, and at the university level, so she has that connection.
Is this the best place for them to click on when they go to the WISE to click request a session?
Yes.
Okay. And once you do that, they're on summer break, but you're on summer break too, but you can read all about it and look at their events here. So that's awesome.
And you can tell her exactly what you're teaching, and she will connect you to someone in that field.
And then if you do want to take a minute to kind of think about any resources that you might want to use, or if you've got resources that you have used, I know we heard earlier virtual field trips. So if you have a resource for that you want to share out with everybody here, I am all about gathering as much info as I can to help me on later. And I'm sure everybody feels that same way. So if there's anything that you know of or anything that you're just interested in using or taking a look at, you're welcome to add that to that next column over there in our Padlet.
And that kind of leads us, I guess we were going to let them see all the resources and then ask them what they could use. That when a couple of people, Tim and others, talked about how they weren't prepared, they didn't prepare their speaker or their students. So we had created this helpful checklist to look at some things. So you'll find that on the guide, but it's kind of a before, during, and after checklist for you.
Yeah, I would definitely say, so I can speak to that a little bit since, that was my downfall in the midst of this. So one big thing I would say is the thing I didn't do was my due diligence in checking about, has my speaker ever spoken to 3rd grade students before, 9-year-olds before? he did ask me, he said, hey, if you'll send me some of their questions and I'll find the answers for them. And so I was like, oh, that sounds great. And so I sent him their questions, and then he, kind of sat there and answered them while we were on Zoom with them. And it was wonderful, except for the parts where the answers went way above their heads, and occasionally, I'll admit it, above my head. And so, I wish I had maybe prearranged just a meeting with myself and him and just gone through and said, hey, here's our questions, but what out of these questions, can you answer in a way that they can more so understand, and kind of filtered through some of those things. And that way, we wouldn't have wasted time, because I will be honest, by the end of it, they were heads down, we were out of it a little bit. And that goes to talking to that speaker about how much time are we actually spending on this, and spending talking to them. The other piece too is doing the questions ahead of time was great, because it gave the speaker the chance to prepare, but it also took that aspect away from my kids getting to use those soft skills and speak to the speaker, and ask their questions directly to him, and those pieces. And so that's a big piece that I learned from, and part of why we created this checklist is to think through those things, because in the moment you go, oh yeah, I'll send you the questions, that sounds great, and then you feeling really good, and then you kind of watched it crumble apart. So but failing forward, learn from my mistakes, I did not do it again. And I'm happy that it led to this a little bit of helpful information that we could put in here as well.
Whoops. I'll reiterate the part about, let's see, I was thinking of something. The engaging activities. They really did like the visuals, and he had videos and everything. I went through the whole presentation with our expert before, and the kids really enjoyed seeing the videos, talking to him, being able to interact. That checklist is available for you on our guide. And let's see, we also have a virtual classroom setup link for you, just talking about lighting, camera, all those things that you may think about. It's better to think about before instead of after, and getting pictures of it. So you can use those for your thank you, which is part of the checklist, and also just to promote this, and help the kids remember what happened that day. Let's see, we had something else. Oh yeah, the suggested schedule. This is really helpful, just to let the speaker know that not to spend a whole hour on something, to move through a schedule. Speakers really appreciate you giving them, maybe an idea of the time frame and what they could use that time for. Do y'all have anything to add to that?
I would say I know structure is definitely good. And then especially if you're like me, I am at one of those schools. I know some people in the chat were talking about it earlier, where this year, actually, I am not allotted any science and social studies time. It is all dedicated to math and reading. And so I rocked the boat a little bit and just carved out some of that math time. And I said, I can explain to you why this is important. So it was one of those situations of ask for forgiveness later. So, that STEM characteristic of rocking the boat, I put into effect a little bit there. But another time, I think I actually used like our morning community meeting time. I just carved out a bit of space in that. And that one, did make me have to kind of keep it a little bit shorter, but it also really helped the speaker kind of narrow down the important pieces that they wanted the kids to hear, and kind of kept it flowing a little bit better. And then, from that and our, culminated different experiences, we've kind of created this schedule here. So, and a wonderful thing to take a look at for yourself, but also, like she said, for your speaker as well.
And just
something else. Oh, sorry, Nola, go ahead.
Just to add to the timing, some of the consideration is for the professionals' time. Sometimes they have to meet, whenever they are available. And having that time, as we said, to kind of say, okay, well, you can spend, maybe 20, 30 minutes, or can you give me, 40 minutes at the end of the day? Having that structured time frame helps them to navigate their availability and your availability at the same time.
These were some of the other items that I think have already been touched on, but just to have maybe to get those questions or thought process going, to have a KWL chart, what they already know, what they wonder about, what they want to learn. and assign roles for the students. Who's going to introduce them to the speaker? Who's going to, do different roles. And I think there's some ideas for that. Practicing respectful listening before the session. I used a graphic organizer the second time we did it because I realized the children were taking notes all over. They weren't exactly sure how to take notes. So that graphic organizer helped them, or maybe a bingo card idea. And then there's all in the guide, there are other engagement ideas for you. So let me look and see if I can pull that guide up. There's the preparing STEM that we've been talking about. And then there's that schedule, student prep, and engagements. We've got all kinds of samples that we're not even addressing here in this. So we hope you'll take a look at the guide and hope that you'll feel that you want to use some of these resources. And of course, follow the checklist.
Something that I wanted to add in with fits under that graphic organizer bingo card idea that Cameron just mentioned. But for the Amazon Future Engineers program, they actually provided a guided note taker for the students that you could just print out. And I actually just adapted it, and it worked beautifully for the Google Ignite sessions as well. And so, even if you don't want to tap into the Amazon Future Engineers, they do have some great resources just for having, guest speakers come in and talk. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
So we have that Padlet still going. I like that everyone has already started coming up with topics that could benefit a STEM guest: electricity, animal adaptations, professional learning. We hope that you've found a resource or idea that you have found and how you will use it. And that column is right here. So if you found something that you think you can use, or even after this session, if later you come up with something, please share it, because I know someone else would probably be able to benefit from that. And if you've had struggles, let us know, because someone might have an answer for that. And then we hope you're setting a goal today of wanting to bring a STEM professional into your classroom. And so we have a place for that as well. So please feel free to add those thoughts to the Padlet. I'm already excited about these past experiences. I'd like to talk more about that one, so that we could, because we do a lot of robotics at our school. But do you have other comments to add about the Padlet?
Yeah, is there anyone we could invite up on the stage?
I'll say, especially if thinking about if there's anything that maybe you're not sure about, or anything that you are just curious about, or if you've done it before and you want to share a success story or a failing forward story, any of those things as well, because I'm sure we've got kind of a mix of people maybe have not done it. But it is, an incredible way. And the more we share, the more we can learn from each other. So
yes, we'd love to have someone come up on stage and tell us your successes or failures.
Or in the chat, because if you're like me, I would probably prefer the chat if I didn't have to be up here. So
I like that someone said they're teaching a nonprofit and they're working to teach other teachers. And this is a great way to coach a lot of other teachers. This is a guide that you can use directly to help impact your teachers as they're teaching STEM.
Also, I have a comment on my animal adaptations too about Citizen Science Project Squirrel, so I'll have to look into that.
Oh, good. Kathy's joining us on stage.
So my question is, I've lost the link to everything, the Padlet, the guide, everything. So the chat, I can't.
We got you.
So I'm not sure.
Oh, so you sound like me. That's my kids. You can ask anybody in my classroom and they will all tell you that technology hates Mr. Stump. I love technology, but the other way around, not so much.
So one thing I was just going to share is that, I work with teachers now, but I work with a nonprofit. And one of the things we do all the time is we try to partner with an institute, another informal, like I'm in Massachusetts, so Mass Audubon, or I'm actually working with the Hitchcock Center for the Environment for something this summer. So to try to bring the scientists in that way, just a little bit different way of bringing that speaker, that STEM person into your classroom. So
absolutely, that's really cool. I did put the Padlet link back in the chat. Are you able to see it by chance?
No, I'm like this. I have no idea what's going on.
Do you see down at the bottom? There's like a row of icons for some things. You see anything like that?
Yes. So I click on that, and that brings me to the side. But all I'm getting is, oh, now I've got the general. That's the Padlet. No, I'm seeing the Padlet from Haley. That's all I'm seeing.
Up at the top, I know for me at least, it says chat participants Q&A. Is it clicked on one of the other ones maybe?
I'm on chat.
Does it say general chat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm in, so general chat, but that brings me to Haley's Padlet. Sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, you're
good.
good.
I have to do this now.
I'm glad I'm not alone. It would normally be me, so you're good.
Hold on, let me try it. Let's see.
And I just posted the STEM guide in the chat.
Also. No, I'm not seeing any of that.
Okay. Which are we in different chats? Like, do we have to?
There are multiple chats, so I can send it directly to Kathy if that's okay.
So which one do we use? Just curious, table chat or general chat?
The general chat is the one we've been using, but we can send it directly to Kathy, and that might help you.
Yeah, so try that, Nola. See if that'll work.
And also, the Padlet has the link to the STEM guide in it, but the STEM guide doesn't have the link to the Padlet.
So if I get to the Padlet,
you got it all.
Got it all.
Yeah,
well, at the moment, nothing's happening
there, but doesn't see it.
I'm still not seeing anything.
Did you see the chat sent directly to you?
No, nothing.
I wonder if pop-ups are blocked.
I wonder if I'm in the wrong. I'm going to try to go out and come back in. I'm going to see
Go to the general chat. Oh,
I'm in the general. Okay. The general chat, I'm getting the middle school one.
Oh, yeah.
For some reason, but I see all of your names under the private chat.
Clearly here.
Oh, so we can do it in the private chat.
I think that's what Nola tried, isn't it?
Oh, it didn't work.
No, it didn't work because I don't think participants. Oh, wait a minute. Don't talk to me anymore. Look at all these people.
Okay, Kathy, I just sent you the link to the Padlet.
I was going to say, it's a real world.
In the private chat. Let's see if it worked.
And I sent the guide to her in a private chat also.
Oh, well, maybe it doesn't work. We're all learning. We're trying to fail forward here.
Yes.
Are we failing?
This awesome.
And I have nothing. So, but finish what you need to do here.
No, you're good. I would say, I think a little bit of the rest of our time could kind of be spent just kind of thinking about, hopefully we know what you're teaching next year, fingers crossed, and thinking about some of those things that maybe you might want to start looking for to kind of start the year off with a bang and bringing a guest speaker right off the bat. So we do have not too much time left, but a little bit of time to kind of think through that. And then there are some spots on that Padlet as well to share out some of those things. So we can kind of capture that and use that to move forward as well.
And yes, the end of the year is also a perfect time to do that. I know I still have 7 days left, but the end of the year is also a time where even if you're not teaching content, you can kind of review things, and then you can use the STEM guide as your resource and bring in people to talk about things you've already taught. It'll be an awesome time to wrap up the school year.
Absolutely. And then just the idea, in those I've got 5 days, so I'm beating you, Nola, but I know some of the things we're going to do this week is just kind of exploring different things as well. To share a little bit of my background, I'm from Branson, Missouri, where there's not a whole lot that exists when you compare it to somewhere like New York City. And when I was 18 years old, I took my first trip there for my senior trip. And I just remember being mind blown and going, look how many things exist here that didn't exist where I'm from originally. And so I keep that in mind a lot as I'm teaching and just opening new doors for kids and allowing them to explore different things because, they're in that same boat where they don't always know what is out there. And, exposing to them to that, at that younger age, especially in elementary, we get that gift of giving to get that to them. So they have, things to focus on and goals to work towards as they go into middle and high school.
Also, I just put a bit.ly, which is easy for somebody to type in. So bit.ly and then the slash Padlet 060323, which is the date. And see if you can get to it that way, Kathy, and anyone else who was unable to get to it. And that'll take you to the questions and the guide. So, and I can actually put the presentation in there too, I guess. Did anyone try that bit.ly to see if it works?
On it.
Try to zoom in.
And we got feedback from Kathy in the chat. She says, I'm back and in the right place this time. So that's good. Thanks, Angelique, for your comment as well. Yes, we've got a lot of good help today. This is such an interesting platform. We're really enjoying navigating around and figuring out where we are and where we need to be. And Kathy, do you see Cameron's screen showing on the slide? We can put that bit.ly in the chat. That might be helpful. Got it. Okay.
Got it. Perfect.
Any other questions? Or I know one of our columns on the Padlet was reservations that you might have if you've tried this before or might be thinking about it.
Yeah, I do know one of my reservations was, what is my admin going to think? And, like I said, there's a little bit of do and ask for forgiveness later and that rocking the boat piece. But, in the end, I will say when I said, hey, here's this thing I did, it was, oh, that's really cool. And so, in the long run, it worked out well. But I think as long as you've got that piece of here's why this is important, then you can really sell yourself with that and get others to do it as well. And I think Cameron was saying, you recorded it. And so that worked out for you for the next year, but it also gives you that opportunity to show colleagues, show admin, anybody that, hey, here's what we did. Look how cool this is. And I know a lot of people I've shown my pictures to that I took, they're just excited about, thinking, well, what if I had been able to do that when I was in school? How cool would that be? And, thankfully technology helps us connect a lot of ways too. But it is always amazing to have an actual physical guest speaker in your room. Now that we're kind of able to do that again too, it's very exciting.
One of the most powerful things I did was get the flip. It's now flip. We used to be Flipgrid reflections from the kids. And you can now put those together in a little reel. And that really was powerful. That was a way that I could gather their feedback, not just standing there and them telling me quickly, but they really thought about it. And I could go back and listen. And I could show the speaker what a difference he made to those kids. So that's something that is in the guide, talking about ways to, gather. That's a tip. But it's a tip that's important to get that feedback from the kids. So you know how to do it better next time and to promote it, like Tim said, for your admins or whoever else, other speakers.
I'll say also what a cool thing to be able to include in like a thank you letter to them too. Recording different reactions and things like that as well would be really neat. Like I said, if there's anybody that wasn't able to get any of those links to, let us know. One person had trouble. She might not be the only one. So we're happy to help best we can.
And if anyone else wants to come up on stage and give us any success stories or ideas you've had or goals that you've set, or you can put it in the Padlet or on the chat.
Looks like we got about 4 minutes left. If you also want to use that time to just kind of brainstorm next year. Now I'm curious. I might go look up the thing that somebody commented on mine for animal adaptations, because now I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Out of curiosity, do we have any other fourth grade teachers in here? I'm curious to know who all is in this room with us. If you want to drop in the chat what it is that you do in your community, we'd love to hear.
Oh, awesome.
Kathy's a former fourth grade teacher.
All right. I've taught fourth grade every year except for last year. They put me in third, and while I did enjoy it, fourth grade is my sweet spot. I love fourth grade.
Nice, Kathy. 15 years.
Something about fourth. Almost every tech coach on our team was a fourth grade teacher. I don't know. They're like those problem solvers. Jim
And then
says,
Jim did say we could head on back to sit at our tables and stuff and talk amongst ourselves. So that sounds like a good plan. If there's no questions, just want to say a big thank you for hanging out with us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time through the rest of our session today.
Great.
Awesome.
Kathy did fifth, sixth, so another good grade level. Super. Thank y'all so much. We enjoyed it.
While I get my slides up on the screen for you. All right. And can everybody see this? Ian, can you give me an audio if you can see this?
Yes, it's all looking good.
All right, excellent. Well, I'll just jump right in then. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their Saturday in June to join us for this, or if you're watching the replay of this, thank you. I've got some fun tools to share with you that I have been learning about for a few years now. And in the past year, I got to put them to use in a very special location. So the title of my talk is Teacher Toolbox, Story Maps Are Not Just for Geography Teachers. So just a little bit of background on me. Currently, I am a robotics and technology teacher in Wickford, Rhode Island, which is in the town of North Kingstown. And prior to coming to this role, I served for several years as a K-12 STEAM coordinator. And during that time, I used GIS, Geographic Information Systems, and story maps with fourth graders. I had been learning about GIS for a number of years. I started using GIS when I was teaching environmental science. I was a high school science teacher for many years. And the kind of core project for my environmental science course was the Envirothon competition. And every year, there was a different special topic for the Envirothon competition that was centered upon some issue in the community. And the students had to assess the resources at the location in consideration of the question or the problem at hand, and present a solution to a team of experts in the field. And they used GIS to help map their resources and tell their story of the place. So maps can be used as a tool to tell stories in all different contexts. It's not just something for the social studies teachers. Science, math, technology, music, the arts, all have place-based information, and we can use story maps to tell those stories. Now, in the past year, I had a special adventure. I got to go to sea for 25 days as a science communication fellow with the exploration vessel Nautilus, which is run by Ocean Exploration Trust. And every single year, they are looking for educators to serve as science communication fellows. So if you are an adventurous spirit and you like to tell science stories and communicate your excitement with broader audiences, check out that fellowship opportunity. It is amazing. So this was a different experience than I had had previously. In 2018, I was a science communication fellow on Nautilus with an expedition with Ocean Networks Canada. And on that expedition, my role was primarily to stand watch for 2 4-hour watches a day in the control van, which is where the ROV operators sit and the scientists and the navigators, and the whole science team sits watch. And my job was to monitor the live comments and questions from the audience at home. So you can sit on your couch and watch the exploration that's happening on Nautilus when they have ROV operations in the water. And so the Ocean Networks Canada cruise was a very ROV, remotely operated vehicle heavy expedition, where the ROV was down on the seafloor installing instruments that are part of the wired observatory that Ocean Networks Canada has. This is part of their early earthquake warning system. And in fact, the expedition that I was on in 2018, they installed the final Titan accelerometer that was part of their early earthquake warning system to help prevent loss of life in the instance of tsunamis. And so in that instance, I was listening to the conversation in the control van, monitoring questions from the chat, and posing those questions to the experts in the control van when the operational conversation allowed for that. But my expedition this past summer was very different. It was not an ROV expedition. It was simply a mapping expedition. For 25 days, we, what they say, mowed the lawn. The ship drove back and forth and back and forth and back and forth in a raster pattern to deploy the multi-beam sonar and the sub-bottom profiler to build a high quality map, because those maps are the foundational information that's going to guide all further research in that area, all further exploration. We were off of Hawaii. We were in the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, mapping there. And so normally they don't have a lot of science communicators on those expeditions because the ROVs aren't in the water and they don't often have funding to have the science communicators aboard those expeditions. But this year, this past year, they did have that opportunity. And so we had more freedom because we weren't locked into those watches in the control van. We had more freedom to explore other communication projects that we thought would serve the broader community well. And so one of the projects that we worked on was to create a series of story maps that answered the question, why mapping matters. Okay, so in addition to being in the control van and hosting live ship-to-shore interactions, as you can see here, we also worked on this project. And so there is a blog that, if Ian, if you could drop that link in there to the blog, I'd really appreciate that, so I don't lose my screens here. That will take you to the mapping series, the series of story maps to try to address the question why mapping matters to the core of exploration. So any folks that have been out on Nautilus are considered part of the core of exploration. And so what we did is interviewed a number of scientists that had been aboard Nautilus a number of times to find out why mapping mattered to them. And in creating this series, we ended up developing this template to collect the information from the people that we were interviewing. And then we realized that this would be a really helpful tool that educators could apply and put to use and have students practice using map tours to tell their stories. Now, if you want to do this in your classroom, you are going to need an organizational account from Esri, and they provide educators with free organizational accounts. Esri tools are premier GIS tools out there in the world. And if you're an industry member using these tools, you have to pay quite a bit to access these powerful tools, but they give these out to schools and nonprofits to make use of because they're such powerful tools for telling stories. So you don't have to do this right now. I have some accounts ready to go for you to do this activity today. But if you want to do this in your classroom, then at least one person in your organization will go through this process and create the accounts. And then anyone in your school will be able to access these tools if you share a username and password with them. Okay, so we have a template that I'm going to share out with you. And it's organized into 3 columns, one where you're going to identify a location of interest, one where I have students draft their text that they want to appear in a section. So if you see an example section of a post here, there's a location feature, then there's the text, and then there's some imagery or video that helps to tell the story. So think about a story that you might like to tell. We're going to take a little bit of time today so that you can build an example map tour and get a little bit of experience, ask any questions that arise while you're working with this, and then see what you can come up with to potentially share with your students and use it in your context, in your classroom. So there's some QR codes there that you can scan, or perhaps Ian, you could drop the link into the chat for me. There is a teacher guide, and then there is a student guide. So I would recommend for right now that you utilize the student guide. It is going to, I think, force you to make a copy of it so that then you could type right into it. So go ahead and grab one of those. And then I will bring that slide up here as well. And
I'm afraid I don't have those links, Shannon. Where can I locate them?
Okay, I will drop it in there then. Let me stop sharing. Okay. Here we go. There is the student copy that I just dropped in. And next I'll grab the teacher copy for you. If you go ahead and get that going first. There we go. Sorry, too many tabs open. Can you let me know in the chat if you've been able to successfully open that? Excellent. All right. So let me. Sorry. Open. There it is. All right. So I've got I'm going to drop another link in here in a sec that lists a bunch of usernames and passwords. And what I'm going to have folks do is just write their name next to one of these sets of usernames and passwords, and that's what you're going to use for your credentials today in order to create your own account. Okay, so if you grab that, can you let me know if that worked for you? Excellent. So go ahead and write your name next to one of those and claim that username and password for yourself. All right. So with your students, you can, have a specific project in mind and assign them a topic area, or if you want to, try to create, a more inclusive environment where they have more choice in what they're going to be presenting about that's related to a certain theme. But for yourself, just you could make a story map about your educational path and how you got to where you are. That's a kind of a fun example project that you might want to have to share out. Or it could be like a travel log. I know some of you have seen quite a few amazing places on the planet. You might want to have a map tour of places that you visited. But take that template, pick something simple, pick 3 places to start with, pick 3 places on the planet that you want to pin. You can type those in, type some brief text, and gather some images and see what you can put together following that template. And what I'd like to do is give you 15 minutes to work at your table with folks and see what you can put together, and then come back and we'll share out, and you'll have a chance to ask me any questions and clarify. How does that sound?
Oh, so shall we pop back to the room now, Shannon? I'll just await your instruction.
Yep. Can I go back to the main room? All right. I know that was a super short amount of time to take a sip from a really big fire hose that is GIS. But I hope this inspires you to dig a little deeper. I know using tools like this can be very intimidating for folks, but they're so powerful, and the students take so much pride in the work products that they can create with these tools. I do hope you'll take some time to dig in further with this. And I am happy to jump on a call with anybody in this room that wants to take this on. I'll work with you to tackle it. It's a really powerful tool. This template is something I've shared with my colleagues at work, and a number of them have taken on the challenge and are working to master it. And it's a really powerful tool. So here in Rhode Island, we just wrapped up our 2023 Rhode Island Story Map competition, which is part of the Esri's National Story Map competition. And we submitted 2 winners from the state onto the national competition. Our state winner for the middle level was actually a 4th grade homeschooler. And that project, we found out this week, drum roll, received an honorable mention at the national level. So it was the 2nd best story map in the nation, and it was done by a 4th grader. So these tools, there's a lot of details to work through, and it can seem intimidating, but it's a really powerful a way to tell stories visually and to build that spatial knowledge, because almost all of the data that we see does have a spatial component and really helps us to understand the landscape a lot better. So I do hope that you'll explore this a little further. I have a Padlet that I created not a Padlet, rather a Jamboard. I'm so used to saying Padlet from our previous presentation, but I've got a Jamboard here that I'm going to drop the link in for you here in just a second. And I invite you to share links to anything that you created as part of your experience today, even if it's not complete yet. If you'd be willing to share the link to that in the Jamboard, so that we can see what our colleagues have created and other ideas that they have. That would be really fun to follow your work and to share that. I was chatting with Adam in one of at one of the tables about managing images as part of this. So the template has a column for location, text, and supporting images. And in the location column, we can put an address, or we can put Latin Lounge, and use that when we then jump into the building tool that is provided there in the guide. Either one of those approaches works. Then in the text, that's where we encourage our students to write with purpose. And I found that creating the story map actually helped me motivate the students to improve their writing much more so than just an essay assignment or something like this, because this product that we're creating in the end is something that is going to be shared with their parents, with other teachers in the building, and we were having a showcase of their work. So it just provided a lot more motivation to improve their writing and go back and revise. And then the trickiest part is probably the images that go along with telling the story. And we had a question earlier about where those images should be saved. My advice is to use a Google Drive and save the images that you want to share in the map tour there. That way you can go and get the URL to share that image and load that into the story map in that way. We talked about compiling multiple images into one and taking screenshots and sharing those, so that image panel that is alongside the text and the location, you can take an image series and arrange them and then take a screenshot and save it as one. It just simplifies the construction of the project a great deal. Oh, Cameron, that's really cool. Yeah, these tools tend to be fairly smart, and they can figure out location tags from images. If it's something you took with a cell phone, it can do that. At this point, has anybody gotten far enough where they have something that they would like to show or share? If you wanted to jump up on stage and tell us what story you are working on telling and show any progress that you've got, I'd love to hear what folks have done. Or the alternative to that, I'd love to hear how you envision utilizing tools like this in your particular setting. If anybody wants to either pop stuff in the chat or come up on stage and talk about how they envision using this, or if you have used GIS tools in the past, to share out with folks how you have utilized them. I know Michelle has done a ton of mapping. Cameron, yeah.
Oh, hey, I don't know if I can share. Am I allowed to share? Yes.
I have to figure out how to stop sharing.
Oh, well, it's okay. Let's see. I think it'll do it. I'll do this real quick. I didn't get very far, but I was going to just do places I've been. Does it show mine? Yeah.
Yep,
And so I added this picture from us in Costa Rica, and it automatically found the location. And I think this would also be a good time to talk to kids about digital, a little bit of digital literacy and privacy and security as their photos have location. And so when they're sharing, this was very cool that it picked up my location, but that might not be something you always want to do. So I think I could tie in that some digital literacy and safety also with this. So that was just an idea that popped into my head. But I think it's interesting I was just going to do different locations I've lived or been and something I've learned from each location. And it could be a great compare and contrast activity of, how different places are the same or different than others. I don't know. I just think it's pretty fascinating.
For sure. Thank you for sharing. And that reminds me, we talked so much earlier about the importance of building relationships. And this could be a great, early in the school year activity related to, file management or whatever. And just getting to know you. What are the places you've been to in the last year? What do we have in common? What are the common experiences that we've had? And just helps us to get to know our kids better. So thank you very much for sharing. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, how are you?
All right.
This is a geek thing for both of us. And Shannon, you just keep inspiring me to push forward with kids with this. We were using a lot of different things and different tools in regards to GIS, but Story Map has changed over time, right? And the ArcGIS program has changed. It's been made much more user-friendly. As you mentioned, one of the huge things I had was organization with kids, because we were asking students to do a collection of primary sources, to cite them, to relate them to an essential question. And you asked if we would share resources. I'm happy to do that. I'm going to throw one in the chat if that's all right, because after all the work you were doing and looking at overlays and maps and all the different things, it's a geek thing. I follow you online and watch what you're doing, right? So I created this doc, and I hope you can access it, to just help kids organize. And to be very honest, it just allows them to place their information and gives them a contextual paragraph, collects those thumbnails, gives links to different JPEGs, and then they can create their story map off of this. But
Nice.
what we have found over the last couple of years is my kids, based on the GIS and ArcGIS work we're doing with story maps, they're now using this template to do their research in high school, which I got to tell you is just rock star. If they figured out a tool that works for them, fantastic. So anyways, just sharing it along. There you go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I love it. Love it. All right. Any other folks want to share their progress or their visions for how they might utilize this in their classroom? I know Adam was talking about a cool art project where students would be encouraged to share information about art exhibits or particular pieces in different locations of the world. And I love that idea. Hi, Carly.
Hi. So I didn't know I needed this until it's now in front of me, but my students complete an unsung hero project, and I put that into the chat. And the biggest thing we struggled with this year, with it being our first year that we completed the project, was the organizing of all the information, because they have to know the historical events that happened with their unsung hero, just kind of the path that they took. They have to gather images, and this I am geeking out about. Like, my heart rate is through the roof because this would have solved so many headaches this spring. So anyways, I'm going to be using it with my unsung hero project, and if you haven't heard of that before, it's in the chat. Check it out. And the museum for those unsung heroes is here in Fort Scott, Kansas. So a little plug for you.
That makes my heart so happy.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. My mind is going in so many directions right now. I'm very excited. If you do story maps in your school, or if you intend to do story maps in your school and you want to use them as a tool to empower your students to make change in your community, then check out your state's story map competition. If your state is not involved in the story map competition, we can put you in touch with the folks that run that, and they provide all kinds of really great resources. They have a monthly webinar to help you get your geeky skills even further elevated with mapping. Charlie Fitzpatrick is the guy at Esri that is shepherding that effort, and they're just really great folks with lots of resources. I'd also put in a plug for the GeoEdC. It's a certification course for geography educators that the GeoEd Center organizes, and I completed that a year and a half ago. And you know, there were folks in that program at all different levels of experience in GIS, but they're all teaching it at different levels, and so they require different levels of expertise. So don't be intimidated if you check that out, and it's a lot of folks from higher ed, but because there are folks at all level utilizing the tools to help their students take their game to the next level. So check that out as well. So going in a lot of directions here, really excited to have you all experiment with this. Please do remember to drop things into the Padlet. Please remember to reach out to me, shannondonovanri@gmail.com, if I can help you customize this template for your setting. If you need an extra set of eyes the first time you jump into this, and you know, oh yes, the 360 photos, that is a huge thing that's coming along now. You can do 360 tours. So if your local tourism board might be really interested in being your best friend, if you get your students involved in creating 360 tours, because they're really powerful tools to engage folks. So I thank you all for your time. Please don't forget to drop in the links into the Padlet about your project so we can share ideas, and reach out anytime if I can be of assistance to you. So thanks for your time, and I hope that was helpful.
All right.
Yes, we're here.
Let me pull our stuff up.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for being here. And if you're here and from another place, please introduce yourself in the chat. You don't have to. I know we've been in our conference today and we're all getting to know each other at our tables. But if you'd like to, you're welcome to. Steve is with us. He's going to be sharing our slides today. And just so that you don't have to write down any frantic notes, we will share the slide deck with you in a view-only mode, and also some resources at the end. And Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you and Steve.
Are you going to introduce yourself, though, Michelle?
Do I have to?
Yes.
I'll start. I'm Michelle Pearson, and I am a middle school educator at Century Middle School in the Colorado Rockies, Denver. I am also involved in STEM because I am a historic preservationist as well as social studies. So I work with technology and engineering with my students in a preservation magnet program. All right, I'll turn it back over. I was hoping I could skip out.
Love it. Well, I am Rachel Peterson. I am an engineering educator, currently a graduate student, PhD student at Texas A&M University, and I'm a former engineering and STEM teacher. I taught high school CTE classes out in Connecticut prior to starting graduate school full-time. I'm now a instructor of record at Texas A&M, teaching pre-service science teachers. So our elementary and middle school teachers who are going to become need to know science and know how to teach it, as well as our future engineering teachers who are getting their engineering degrees and their teaching license at the same time. I am their methods instructor. So I am so excited to have y'all here. The other piece of why I'm here, hopefully you can hear me, my camera's kind of jumping around, but I am also the outreach chair for the Women in Science and Engineering at Texas A&M, and we run a really cool program that you're going to hear all about today that really is a part of what this session is about. So, Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
I really should have went first. Following these two rock stars is always difficult. I'll start with Tamina Khan was not able to join us today. She's integral to our group. But she had some health issues this morning and was not able to join us. So my name's Steve Elza. I teach automotive technology in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, so in Illinois. For me, STEM and CTE is integral to who I am as a person. For me, it's the reason that I went to college, being the first one in my family to go to college. And it's truly, it was a teacher that got me into teaching. And so to me, this is my, this was my, people gave to me, and this is my way of giving back. So STEM and CT is extremely close to me, and teaching automotive technology obviously falls right within that. So let's get rocking here. Hopefully you all can see the slides. Let's talk about what we're going to do today. And I really want you, as we're going through, as some of you may have heard, like relationships are key. So as we're going through, I really want to learn how these guiding questions are going to apply to you. So some of the things I want you to think about is, how can we empower students and educators to make classroom and career connections to envision future STEM careers and opportunities? It's so important. And we heard through our keynotes in that, we've heard through our conversations at our tables, that we need not only our students, but our communities to be able to see one another and see themselves in those opportunities in STEM careers. So as we're going through today, keep that as one of your guiding questions. 2, how can we collectively explore the skills students will need to be competitive in future STEM job opportunities? We know that things are changing, not yearly, not monthly, but they're changing daily for us. And so that how do we create that collective group to explore those skills and keep up to date with them? And then 3, how can we support inquiry processes which explore how the nature of STEM phenomena affect our daily lives? And again, I think that what we do as teachers, no matter where you teach in that school or what you do within the education, the STEM phenomena is extremely important to our daily lives. So keep those 3 questions in mind as we work through our presentation today. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because Diane and Kristen went through a lot of this, but I will say that, year 1 was really about getting to, we took teachers that were in their first 5 years of teaching, and we took a more veteran group of teachers, and we worked together on examining STEM. What is it? What is it? How do we use it? What does it look like in different areas of the country? Year 2, we went into those those rock star STEM teaching characteristics, which you've seen earlier. Year 3, we did that professional learning series. So we really spent some time on what does professional learning look like within our classrooms, and we looked at that from both the student lens and the teacher lens. Year 4, we actually engaged in those career experiences. So each one of us throughout the nation invited people into our classrooms, and we really looked at what were the pitfalls, what did we learn from those experiences, how are they good for the kids, how could we do better in serving our kids. And then year 5, we took all that information, we put it into these STEM career guides. And so you will have some access to the high school guide here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And it's chocked full of what we've learned, but it's also got a lot of our resources that we found to be helpful. And then year 5, we put all of those things into action, and here we are in this high school convening. So.
All right. So just as Kristen and Diane also talked about the characteristics of a rockstar STEM leader, as good educators, we just want to point back to that and make sure that that's kind of in the back of our brain, because that's something that we're working with all day today, is to think about how we empower those characteristics, how we can grow. That's a huge piece for us. And I know that the growth in teaching STEM and being involved in STEM is really critical. And so these characteristics help us think about what's our next step? What are we reaching for? What are we looking for in the future? Not only for our students, but ourselves collegially and our profession as a whole. Because as we build these types of career engagement pieces, these characteristics will help us become stronger collectively to do that. So Steve, would you mind going to that next slide? Because this is going to show some really great stuff. As we engaged in really empowering the conversation around career engagement and stakeholder connections, we did it ourselves. Just as Steve mentioned and Rachel referenced, we jumped into this sometimes into the deep end of the pool to figure out, how are we going to swim? How are we going to make this happen? And what are we going to do? And all of us have a different role that we've played in connecting with those STEM careers and those people in the field, and also that work with us, that can really show what STEM means to us and to our students, and for our students to see their faces in the field, to see who they are in the field, to see that STEM isn't a distant reality, but it's a real connected reality for so many of them. The pictures here, I love them because they really kind of reflect all the different avenues that we took, whether it was having a set of speakers talk, whether we were in the field working at a visit, talking to somebody who was a STEM person. And I say person because it's not just an engineer or a teacher or somebody who's working at the career. It could be a researcher, it could be anybody. And that was what is, I guess, a core component of this conversation. When you talk about empowering students to look at STEM careers, the entire universe is open to this. Be creative, be thoughtful. Who are you going to connect with? How are you going to connect with them? And we've got some really good ideas, because we spent a year, actually, we've spent several years thinking about it, but this year we dialed into it deeply and really looked closely at what those successful pieces are for high school level students. Now, if you're not just teaching high school and you're teaching secondary, or you may be in a setting that is not necessarily classroom related, that's okay. These are best practices. In fact, all of our guides offer best practices. And I encourage you to think about that. We're going to give you a link to them later on today. But look at all the different guides, because each one of them overlap a tad, but all have fantastic structures for connecting with classrooms, out of classroom experiences, working with groups of students. And I think you can learn something from each one. So we're going to dial in a little bit deeper here for our high school one, and let's do that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. You know, our goal for this is to really deepen our understanding of how to provide high quality classroom based interactions. When we think about this, as I said before, relationships are key. And I think that building those relationships with the kids to identify where they're at, what are their needs, what is their passion? We really have to dive into that before we can ever start inviting people into our classroom to be a part of it. We really need to know who those students are. Providing that sample exploration of STEM career connection. You have to, our kids need to know what to expect. It's always fun. It's always fun for that new exciting piece, but when we're taking the time of our classroom, and we know how valuable that time is with those kids, but we also know how valuable that time is with that community member, that career expert, that researcher. It's really important that we have those, that the both sides understand what that is. Discussing that career engagement guide for high school. And I loved what Michelle said is, I teach high school, but knowing what they're doing in STEM at the primary level and at our middle school level really plays into, number one, how can I support their work from my end, but also how does their work support what I'm doing? So we're going the same direction here. We have to make sure that we're prepping our professionals. When those professionals are coming into our classroom, we have to make sure that we know what they're going to be doing here, and that they are ready to take on that class of 20 or 30 young, intelligent minds. And then we're going to obviously have a bunch of resources and then questions with our next steps.
All right. I'm waiting for my mic to turn on. Okay. I was waiting for that delay of my mic to turn on. So, all right, y'all. So we wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of this, an example of what we've been doing with students in the classroom. Part of this came not only out of the pandemic, but this opportunity for bringing people from all over to your classroom. So Steve had mentioned some local connections. I know Tamina couldn't be here, but she's had some wonderful experiences with the local community and local STEM career specialists and bringing them into their classroom. With the organization I was a part of, we had the opportunity to develop a virtual program trying to bring people from all over and connect them with teachers and students from across the country. And so we really wanted to showcase and model a little bit of what this looks like, but also give you an opportunity to hear from some amazing STEM specialists who get to communicate to students what it is they do, who they are, their background, how they're a real person. We like to share that as like their STEM story, right? It's their what makes them a real human being. The goal in this is that we're trying to break down a lot of these typical stereotypes around what it means to do science or do engineering or to be a STEM person. And so having opportunities for role models, we talked about it earlier, people who look like students or have similar backgrounds. And so sharing in those hobbies that you have and your upbringing and, I'm a first generation student. Hey, me too. That kind of stuff gives students the opportunities to see themselves in somebody else and see that that's a possibility for them. So we've brought on two amazing people today. If we can pull them up to the stage, that would be fantastic as I'm chatting. So Hannah Stroud is an aerospace engineer from Texas A&M University. Amazing, wonderful human being. And so she's going to get to share some really cool stuff, especially a piece that I won't ruin it because Hannah's going to share it, but a cool piece about how her work transcends various STEM or engineering disciplines. And so that's really neat to see. And we also have Marian Natron. And so Marian is, again, another amazing rock star person. I brought two of my best. They're going to be here to share a little bit about themselves. What we'll do is Hannah is going to be going first. She's going to give a little presentation about herself, share kind of a sample of what she would do with K through 12 students. And then we'll hear from Marian. If you have questions for these folks in the chat, we're going to kind of model it like we would with students. So be thinking of what questions you can ask them. Throw them either in the Q&A section or in the chat, and Michelle is going to be monitoring that for us as well. We will have a section after the two of them present where we can do a Q&A, because as Steve mentioned, this is a great opportunity for students to get to ask those real questions, to get to engage with STEM professionals. So that's enough of me talking. So I'd love to jump to introduce Hannah Stroud. And so Hannah, I believe you should be up, and Steve will click us to the next slide so we can see Hannah's presentation.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction, Rachel. So my name is Hannah Stroud. I'm a PhD candidate in aerospace engineering at Texas A&M. I am originally from Buffalo, New York. I've noticed that that arrow is not in the correct location at all. So just, move that to the left a little bit, and that's actually where I'm from. On the next animation, I have been in College Station now for about 10 years. 2 of my degrees are from here, and the next one will be as well. So I graduated with a BS in 2018 and a master's in 2020 and a PhD pending in 2023. And all of those degrees are in aerospace engineering. On the next animation, I have been fortunate enough to do a lot of odd jobs, particularly in my undergrad. So I've done some more traditional looking aerospace engineering work. I've worked with drones for the most part. So fixed wing, small scale UAVs designed for surveillance. But I've also had the opportunity to do a lot of kind of odd jobs as well that actually tied in really well with my aerospace experience. So I've worked in manufacturing, so doing traditional manufacturing methods. I've worked in additive manufacturing, doing 3D printing. But I've also done things like metallurgy as well. On the next animation, I was very fortunate in my undergrad to get involved in research opportunities, and that's kind of inspired my whole graduate career. So I kind of started off as like the manufacturing expert doing a lot of experiments, but as I progressed through undergrad and grad school, I eventually wound up doing some computational work as well, so working with computers to sort of validate our experiments and seeing if the math that we're doing is actually what we're expecting it to do. Sure, on the next slide.
Sorry.
You're good. So in aerospace engineering, there are 3 kind of main fields that you can go into. So there's what I do, which is aerospace structures. So we're the ones ensuring that the plane is light enough to get off the ground, but also strong enough so that the wings don't fall off mid-flight, because nobody wants that. There's aerodynamics, which basically means that the shape of your airplane will generate lifts and cause it to fly. And then there's dynamics and controls, which means when the pilot turns the stick, the plane is moving in the direction that they expect it to move. So as I mentioned, I'm sort of in the materials and structures segment of that. And I've been super fortunate to kind of get to explore aerospace in a new way. So often when we think of aerospace, we think of airplanes and rockets and satellites, and those are main applications that are very well tied into those 3 core areas that I mentioned. But they're not the only engineering areas that use those 3 skill sets. And so my master's work was actually doing knitted structures. So my master's is technically in knitting, which is a very fun line to say. But basically what I was doing is I was looking at different structures to make up fabrics for things like spacesuits and medical devices. And so my aerospace background really helped me to develop the skill sets that applied to a very different looking application. And so kind of through that work, I ended up developing curriculum for university students to also kind of explore where their aerospace skills apply outside of the aerospace field as well. So they looked at how wind turbines were affected by wind loading, how bridges basically changed the flight paths of birds based on the aerodynamics over the bridge. And then for their final project, they took a look into the world of medical devices. And so the 3 pictures there kind of above the colorful knit. The one on the right is actually an arm. So students designed a tourniquet that was designed to be less painful. So they were attempting to quantify how hard the tourniquet was pressing on your arm. So if you're not familiar with what a tourniquet is, basically in cases of extreme traumatic injury where the patient is experiencing a large loss of blood, the only goal in that moment is to stop blood flow as quickly as possible. And how we do that right now is essentially by tying a very tight cord around the limb that's losing blood. And it's super, super painful. But we generally know what arteries and large blood vessels the blood is coming from. So if we could target those in a more intelligent way, we could potentially make the device less painful. So our students looked at how much pressure and how much shear stress was being applied to the arm. And if they included an insert that could target the artery, they theorized that it would be less painful. Another group on the bottom looked at aerodynamics over a stent. So a stent is a medical device that goes inside of your blood vessels, usually to keep them open. So it's what happens when someone experiences like a heart attack due to like buildup of plaque. Generally, we want to keep blood flowing nicely through our blood vessels, and so we can prop them open with these medical devices. However, the medical devices themselves actually affect how the blood flows over them and can sometimes have adverse effects down the line. And so we want the medical device to have as minimal of an impact on the blood flow as possible. And so these students looked at things such as like strut shape and how far apart each of the stent struts were from each other in order to kind of minimize the effects of what the blood vessel wall is actually seeing as blood flows over it. And then the final one in the top left was actually something that I didn't even know was possible, but they designed an inhaler that was designed to target medicine only to one lung. So often when you have a lung injury, it's only to one of your two lungs, but currently we just assign an inhaler to distribute medicine to both lungs. And that's not always the most effective way. Sometimes the healthy lung can be negatively impacted by medicine that it doesn't need. And if those medicines include antibiotics, that kind of increases antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and that's not something we want to propagate. So the students designed an inhaler that could change the location of where it distributes medicine in your mouth to target a lung specifically. So only the sick lung is receiving medicine. And they were actually about 60% effective, so they could get 60% of the medication to the lung that needs it, which is pretty cool. And then kind of transitioning on into my PhD work, now I work on more medical devices. This is the same slide, just in the top right corner. So I actually more specifically study stents now, and I look at how I look at specifically bioabsorbable stents. So what that means is if we don't want to do a second surgery to remove the device from the person, we can design it to go away in your body over time. So the blood flow over the device is actually removing material from the surface and causing it to slowly dissipate. That's all great. However, if the blood flow gets a little too turbulent in some area, it could cause the stent to go away faster in one area and then fracture. And that's not what we want. So I design modeling tools to kind of predict if and when that will happen and how we can design the shape of our stent such that that doesn't happen. And while that seems like a very not aerospace problem, we use all sorts of tools developed strictly for the aerospace industry. So all of our fluid modelers were developed for airplanes, and a lot of our structural solvers as well came from the aerospace industry to begin with. So all of my skills are being used, which is really cool. And then the final kind of plot on the bottom is, this is kind of an abstract concept, right, to introduce. I've thrown a lot of big terminology at you and changed hopefully a little bit of your perception of aerospace. But how can we kind of start introducing that concept to students earlier? And so we developed a game to draw analogies between like actual navigation of a spacecraft and things that students understand already. So we developed basically this game. It's called Space Traffic Jam. You can Google it and play it for yourself if you would like. But it basically uses two levels, the first of which is an Earth level where you're a car that has to go to a destination and you have to obey the rules of the road and only go on your turn. And you get penalized for disobeying certain rules. And then in the second level, it's essentially the same concept, but now you're a satellite and your motion is more complex. So you're now moving around the Earth in an orbit, but you still have to obey like an analogous set of rules. So that's kind of all of what I do. I like to extend basically aerospace to unconventional applications and then kind of tie back into the skills that motivated the original applications to begin with. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks so much, Hannah. We appreciate you. That's awesome. And we can pull Marion up, but we'll have Hannah up during the Q&A as well. So thank you, Hannah. Yeah, I really wanted y'all to see a great way to incorporate different science or engineering or math ideas in totally unconventional. Oftentimes students will see like, oh, a scientist is this, but they don't think there are so many other routes that they could go in order to achieve those same goals. So I'm really glad we got to hear from Hannah. We're going to hear next from Marion about her STEM story, and then we will go to Q&A. So feel free to throw those questions in the chat that you have for Hannah as Marion is speaking. All right, Marion, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks for all the organization and the invitation. So I also have a few slides here. So let's dive into them. I usually start by saying, hello, my name is Marion. I'm a scientist. I'm a researcher at Texas A&M University. And I'm a geoscientist. I study rocks. And my job title is also planetary scientist because I study rocks of this planet in particular. So that's where, yeah, usually depending on the age of the classroom, we could spend a little bit of time, specifically speaking, identifying Mars and maybe chatting a little bit, especially if the kiddos are a bit younger, but where Mars is in the solar system. But then the next topic that I like to bring up is to thank you very much, is to chat a little bit about what I did before my current job, before working as a scientist, and trying first and foremost to share that this is just my experience. So whatever I share through those slides and as we discuss is very much my experience, because there are many different ways to be a scientist, to become one, and there are different types of scientists. So this is just one experience among many. So if there are things that people don't really relate to, that doesn't mean they cannot be a scientist. So just to emphasize this a little bit with the kids. And so the way I usually chat about it is I say that I didn't know even what a scientist was. No, there is no official scientist in my family. So the thing I've been consistently following since pretty much primary school has been trying to follow what I like doing and trying to know better what I like and know better what I'm good at. And usually those things I find in my case are related, because the more I like something, the more I'm willing to put time into it and the better I'd become at it. So that's why on this slide I'm showing some of the things that I really liked, even in primary school through high school. And some of these include, in particular, learning in general, reading, several of the sciences I was taught in school, sparkled my interest and triggered my interest. I also very much did like and still do like outdoor sports and exploring in general. So as I was going through my years of school, one of the questions that I started arising for me was, can any of these become a job? And I didn't know really. So one of the things that I did was really speak with a lot of people, speak with teachers in particular, speak with my parents, ask them how they had found their job and figuring out how to do a job that I would be happy in, and ask people in general. So if we can please go to the next slide. It is just to say that through those years, since primary school up to then high school, I did get the chance to go to college afterwards. And now my job as a scientist, I kept chasing those things that I like. And in orange, what I'm listing in these slides are some of the things that I can think of that has helped me choose my path year after year, as I had to make decisions on what job to find and what to do next. So one of the things included chatting with people, asking questions in general about how people make those decisions in their life and learning new things. I'm dropping here a little map because, as you might hear from my accent, I'm from France, and so I've lived in Europe and studied in Europe for a while and got the chance to also travel and work abroad. So I got to learn other languages, including English and Spanish. That has helped me also connect with a lot of new communities, new people, and has actually helped me a lot in learning more about what to do next. I cite here also the internship and summer jobs, but really any hands-on experience has always been really, really helpful for me. Again, to learn better what I'm good at and what I like doing. So those are some of the little rocks along my trail that have helped me. And so the last maybe piece of we can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. The last bit that I'd like to share about is, okay, on a daily basis, what do I do and where do I do my job as a sanitary scientist? So in the middle is the office, because this is where I spend a good chunk of my time. On the top right, I added Mars again because I get the chance to work for NASA on, in particular, some of their most recent rovers that have been sent on Mars and that help us exploring the surface of Mars. So that is out there, but I do that job from my office, very much analyzing this data and writing about it. On the left-hand side, I added a little image about the laboratory, the lab, because I also get to run some analysis and design some experiments in the lab to try and understand better this data from Mars. And on the right-hand side, I added some pictures because I get to do field work as part of my work. I go in the field and I study rocks in the wild, and sometimes I bring some of them back into the laboratory to analyze them. So yeah, pretty much just a slide to share some of the main aspects of my weekly job, really. And last but not least, I get to do a little bit of teaching and sharing my research, both with students and with colleagues at conferences. So those are the main, just to show the kiddos that's some, most of these things I get to do on a weekly basis. And it ties back to what I was kind of hoping to do, really, getting a little bit of outdoors, and having the chance to exchange with a lot of different people, which is very much what I like doing. So I'll stop here, and thanks very much again. Happy to stay later for the Q&A, and back to you, Rachel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marion. We appreciate it. Yeah, and we'll keep you up here because we'll have about 5 minutes of a Q&A session where we can ask some folks, or we can ask them some questions. So if you have a question, feel free to either throw it in the Q&A or in the chat. But I'll start us off as we're waiting for one with Marion, who's up here already. And if we could get Hannah back up on the main stage, that'd be awesome too. But Marion, you mentioned you work in your office, but you have these other opportunities. I think one of the things that students often think about scientists or engineers is that they may be working behind a desk all day or working, by themselves all day long. And they get this misconception that it's a very isolated job. So can you tell us a little bit more about maybe how that may have a kernel of truth, but how else you might get to collaborate with folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's true that on a daily basis, I get to analyze my data, my scientific data, look at it, and for that often I just need a computer and a screen to do that. But what is really a great good chunk of my time and my work is really exchanging with colleagues about that specifically. There is very little work that I can do completely on my own. It varies a bit. I have colleagues who can spend weeks really focusing on their things, but for most of us, in the end, we exchange with other colleagues about it, and to try and tackle those scientific questions and to get some feedback from other experts. And specifically in my line of work in space planetary sciences, there is no way only one person could put together a mission like what NASA is doing, sending a rover on Mars. So it is absolutely very much a collaborative and multidisciplinary environment. So from the engineers who put together those missions and continue working with us as the rover explores Mars, to the different types of scientists who know about different types of rocks and maybe specialize more in the biological aspect, and some colleagues who study the atmosphere of Mars who work with us. It's very much collaborative in order to get the best science possible and just make those projects happen.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks, Marion. I'll ask this question. We got it in the Q&A section. to Hannah. What made you want to go into this career early on?
All right, sorry, waiting for the microphone. I actually have a really specific like event in my life that caused me to want to be an aerospace engineer. And basically, I had the opportunity to fly in like a general aviation aircraft. My uncle was traveling to basically like join our family for family vacation, and the timing worked out that he brought me with him. And the pilot asked if I had ever flown a plane before, and I was like, no, like I'm 10. And so he had me in the co-pilot seat, and he was like, all right, well, like have fun, like go fly it. And we were like up over the middle of nowhere, Canada, so you know, no danger, and we were pretty high up. And so I was like, you know, moving the wheel around and pressing the pedals. And one thing I really couldn't figure out is how come the plane turned two ways, right? It turned when you would turn the wheel, it would roll, and then when I press the pedals, the rudder would move and it would yaw. But I didn't know what that was called or what that meant at the time, and the pilot was very hand wavy about it. And so when we made it up to meeting with our family, my family has many smart people in it. Like my mom is an engineer, my dad's a teacher, and my uncle and aunt both work in business. And so I'm asking them, like, how does this happen? Like, what is this? And they didn't know. And I'm like, wow, these smart people around me don't know. And we didn't have internet. And so I sat and thought about it for a week. And when we finally got back to where I had internet, the first thing I Googled was, who are the people that know the answer to this question? And Google told me aerospace engineers. And so I said, all right, that's what I want to be.
I love that. That's amazing. Yes. And I want to point something out for everybody who's in the audience. One thing that I think both Marion and Hannah do really well that is actually a part of the process that we've found when you're working with guest speakers, educating them on how to do this, which these two do naturally, is communicating in a way that younger audiences can understand. So you'll notice Hannah saying a lot like this term and this term, which really just means blah, blah, blah. And then she'll say it in like a plain text, right? And so that's really important to talk through with your speakers prior to having these kinds of engagements with your students, to recognize, hey, you're about to talk to fourth graders and they probably don't know what blah, blah, blah is. And so I love that the two of them do this so phenomenally. They just take opportunities to take their big words and explain it down at the level that makes sense to students. And that's really important. So thank you both for showcasing that. I think that's fantastic. Okay, I know we are running short on time. I do want to address one question in the chat, and I think Michelle is going to hit it here soon as well. So before we do that, because the question is directed to us, I want to give a big round of applause to both Marion and Hannah. Thank you so much for coming up and sharing. If you have additional questions for them, feel free to continue throwing them in the chat, and I can send it to them. I can provide you with their email information as well. But I'll go ahead and address that last question that's in the Q&A before we jump into the last slide that we have for you. The question is, sometimes it's hard to find people who are willing to give their time to provide advice. What do you suggest as tips for finding these people? Whew! Okay, so here's where I get to kind of brag on the cool programs that we have. Well, first of all, reach out to lots of people. So while you may have one specific person in mind, there may be other opportunities or organizations that can fulfill that same kind of goal. So reaching out to multiple places is really helpful. But I'm going to shout out different programs like the one that we organized at Texas A&M is called Zoom a Wise Woman. And I think Michelle threw that information in the chat already for our thing there. And you can sign up. It's there. Beautiful. You can sign up to request a speaker. And so if you have a specific topic in mind, like say, I know for Marion, we've had you come in and talk when they were doing a specific geology lesson. And so she gave her chat, talked about how she does cool stuff with rocks on Mars. And then the kids got to share about their geology projects. And so we can match you up with all the amazing volunteers that we have from all these different backgrounds. If you have a specific area, or we can just find you, I want a scientist, I want an engineer. And that's the beauty of partnering with universities, partnering with nonprofit organizations. If anybody's in Philadelphia, I'm going to shout out the Explore STEM Philly group. They're phenomenal. They have a very similar program where they get
schools connected with people in the community. So there are tons of organizations out there that are doing this kind of thing. I know I'm going to shout out Teresa too, because Beyond 100K probably has partners that do these kinds of things too. So reaching out to those kinds of websites, those kinds of companies that can get you connected. There are people who are dying to talk to kids. They want to share about the cool stuff that they do. They want to promote the next generation of thinkers and especially the next generation of diverse thinkers. So that is, if you have more questions on where and how to find people, in fact, Michelle, what do we have available for these folks? What is something that we can share with them?
Well, there you go. And that's why we're here. It's that STEM career engagement guide that really focuses on 3 real quick tips. And I put in the chat a couple things to think about. Skype a Scientist has been around for a long time. Microsoft is butting up with them to make sure that it is continuing to be widespread. Your local university, think about your trades professionals. All of those people contribute to that STEM conversation, which is really, really important. And we've got some ideas too for you that are in our STEM guide. We really need to think about how we plan for this. It's wonderful to have you guys come in. And you know what? You all are just naturals. And I will just say, Hannah, thank you so much. Marion, thank you. Merci beaucoup. So we appreciate that. You have a natural way, and you've been doing this, I can tell, because of the way you speak, but also the way you share. And sometimes it takes some collaboration and some cooperation with our stakeholders. We've given you some ideas in our guide that will help you plan, that'll give you some structures for doing that effectively, so that everybody comes to the conversation really with the best ideas in mind. And that's to really connect students with their world and with STEM professions. And we, in our guide as well, we really want to engage students in this conversation. So we give you some ideas about how to make this student-centered, how to make it really alive and interactive and built with questions. And that's really something that we want to do. And then we want to honor the collaboration and keep the connection, because you guys are fantastic. And we want to keep finding out the great things that you're doing and the wonderful endeavors that you're involved in. And because you're going to spark that light for many students. And so we're going to give you a link right now. We're going to put it in the chat that allows you to get that STEM guide. We're not going to spam you. It's just a way to access the PDFs. So I'm going to go ahead and place that in the chat. And Steve, do you mind advancing the slides just real quick? That would be rock star. You can QR code this, or you can click on the link that's in chat. This is going to give you access to the guide. It's just going to ask you for your name and your email. It'll send back that PDF piece as well, so you can do it. That's pretty amazing. And don't be surprised if the relationships that you have actually end up building some wonderful long-term structures and engagement for your students. We hope for that, because you guys inspire. And all of you who are working to connect to classrooms are inspiring our next generation. And so we hope that this guide is going to be able to assist you in that, so that you've got the ability to access what you need. We're coming up really close on our time, but we promised that we would also share our slide deck with you. So it's got these links and some ideas that you can continue to focus back on. I'm going to place that in the chat as well. And so you've got that URL. It'll also be shared in a guide that's going to go out from NNSTOY and the STEM convening after everything. But there's the link so you can view our doc and get back to that QR code. And we've got some connection information here. If you need assistance, if you'd like to brainstorm ideas, if you'd like to connect and see what's happening around the country, please feel free to be in touch with us. I'm going to turn it back to Rachel and Steve to close us all together before we head back to the main room. There you go, Rachel. You got to hit the mute or it's coming. I know it takes a minute. You're trying.
Okay. I was trying. I hit it like 10 seconds ago. All right. Well, we really want to thank you all so much for joining us. And I want to thank Hannah and Marion for sharing about themselves, giving you a little snippet of what it looks like to bring amazing STEM speakers into your classrooms. I absolutely am so excited that we have this opportunity to share the hard work that this team has been presenting. And so if you have questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to us. We are going to head into I think back at that main building. I could be wrong. Let me see. We're going to have a little bit of a break before the next breakout session, which shout out to Holly. Holly's going to be presenting in the next session soon. So thank you again for having us. We'll hang here if you have any questions, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I echo everything that Michelle and Rachel said. And remember, not only are we, feel free to reach out to any of us, but again, as an NNSTOY, there are literally teachers across the nation that are willing to share, support. I know for me, I love if we as a world, as a country, as a state, as a city are doing well, it affects all of us. So again, please reach out and ask questions often.
And I've just hopped in. I'm putting the presentations in the chat for you, so you don't have to refer back to our doc, just so it makes it easy. If you'd like to stay and have a wonderful conversation with our 100K team, they're going to be talking about mapping the challenges that are retaining STEM professionals and cultivating that belonging piece to follow up to that wonderful conversation that we had this morning. That'll be right here in this building, and so you can remain here. That's going to be that last post that I just put in there. And there's a couple others that you can go to as well in building number 1, using a practitioner model to infuse inquiry into lab activities, and then also story maps, talking about, it's not just about geography, it's about a lot of different things. And Shannon Donovan will be leading us in that. Those sessions will start at 3 o'clock. You can head off to those. We look forward to sharing more learning with you as we move forward. And as we mentioned, we'll be hanging out here, but you're welcome to take a quick break, grab a snack, give a stretch, and then head on into those next wonderful presentations.
Much for joining our mapping session. Really appreciate NNSTOY for putting this event together and the opportunity to be here, and all of you for spending your Saturday with us talking about belonging, really inspiring students to think about all the different ways STEM can be in their career, and now mapping. So what we're going to do today, try that one more time. We're going to be doing today, you can see our roadmap here. I'm going to share a little bit about Beyond 100K. I'm not going to go into too much detail. Hopefully you were able to see my colleague Teresa's presentation at the start of our convening, and just share some background Beyond 100K, our mapping process. You're going to have some time to actually contribute to the mapping process and play this hopefully fun game-like survey tool we've created called the Relationship Mapper. We'll then have some time for reflection, and then we'll close out together. So our work started back in 2011, actually, when President Obama made a call in a State of the Union speech that we needed 100,000 more STEM teachers in 10 years. And so realizing that this was not a call that anyone could answer on their own, 100K in 10, the banner we were under for our first decade, was born. And to answer that call, we built 3 interconnected strategies. The first was we knew we needed a network. We brought together more than 300 diverse organizations that were all working to prepare and support STEM teachers. We also knew that if we were going to get to the 100,000, that would be amazing, but it also wouldn't get to why this has been such a sticky problem in the first place. So what we did was we created a map, which we called the Grand Challenges, to understand why is it so hard to get and keep great teachers, especially in STEM. And so the Grand Challenges map showed us not only what those challenges were, how they were connected, but also several high leverage points that really made sense if we wanted to make progress and really shift the system, where we should be focusing our energy and resources. And you can see that there's a few areas that we focused on a network that came from this map. The first was nurturing positive work environments for teachers. The second was enabling joyful and authentic math experiences. And the third was increasing equity in high school STEM. And so this map really informed the priorities of the Beyond 100K network and the work that our partners were doing together. The third strategy we developed was tools for making progress, building trust, accelerating learning, and enabling shared problem solving. Because while most people understand the importance of collaboration and want to engage into it, it's not always as easy to actually do so. And so 10 years after launching, we reached our goal, actually exceeding it, preparing nearly 110,000 STEM teachers. But we knew that wasn't the ultimate peak, and we had much more work to do together. And so now we've set a new moonshot goal, which is by 2032, we will prepare and retain 150,000 new STEM teachers, especially for schools serving majority Black, Latinx, and Native American students. And to do this, we'll support our network to also not only prepare teachers who increasingly reflect the demographics of the student population, but also to cultivate workplaces and classrooms of belonging, to really make sure that we are creating belonging for students and also creating belonging for teachers, knowing that's so important for folks wanting to go into the STEM teaching profession and also wanting to stay there. And so with that new goal, we also needed a new map. We needed to understand what it was going to take to get there. And so in the fall of 2022, we launched an effort to co-create a map of the challenges standing in the way of this goal. And we did this by building on our first Grand Challenges map, which was never meant to be stagnant. Indeed, we were working very hard to make progress against it, and engaging hundreds of perspectives across the STEM teaching and learning system and collectively asking, what are the challenges holding back the education system from preparing and retaining PK through 12 STEM teachers who can cultivate classrooms of STEM belonging, focusing particularly on the experiences of Black, Latinx, and Native American students and teachers. And so you can see here that we started this process again by engaging hundreds of different perspectives, asking them what they saw from their unique vantage point to be the challenges here, and also what was underneath those challenges, why did they exist? We took all of that in to distill a set of challenges that I'm going to be sharing shortly, and then we're now here identifying which of those challenges are the highest leverage opportunities for impacting the system. And so what we will learn through this process, how we will use the map, will really shape the priorities of the Beyond 100K network and also create a more comprehensive view and understanding of the problem for the field as a whole. The challenges. So I mentioned that we talked to hundreds of different people, and from those distilled a set of challenges. A few framing notes before we get into that. The intention of the map that we're co-creating together is to represent the challenges that are experienced by STEM teachers and students in the United States broadly. And so through this process, we prioritize listening to individuals who are closest to these challenges, Black, Latinx, and Native American STEM teachers, and STEM teachers who teach majority Black, Latinx, and Native American students. But we also heard from STEM teachers across races and identities and across the country that these challenges feel true to their experience. And so that does not mean that every STEM teacher or school will encounter each of these challenges. Again, the work of our network and the work that we invite you into is to make sure that they don't. But it does mean that this is reflective of the landscape of the challenges that are being faced across the country. Another thing I wanted to share is that many of the challenges on this map are rooted in systemic and institutionalized racism. And so it's imperative that we not only recognize the impact of this in our work, but we're also identifying how to most effectively and powerfully focus our collective efforts to dismantle it. We heard from nearly 600 people across 44 states. So they either contributed to identifying these challenges or gave feedback on them through interviews, group listening sessions, surveys, or workshops. And I'll pause for a second and let you read a little bit about who contributed to this work. And so it was really important for us to, of course, making sure that we are hearing from STEM teachers and school leaders who are close to these challenges, but we also really wanted to make sure that we were hearing from young people, which we are defining here as under 30. That is not to say that anyone else on this call who is not in that age group is not still a young person, but that's how we defined it for this process, because we really wanted to make sure that we were hearing from individuals who are either currently experiencing STEM learning or had very recently experienced STEM learning. And that perspective was also part of this process because they too are so close to these challenges and have direct lived experiences with them. Here you can see an overview of the challenges. So we distilled 83 challenges total and organized them into 4 themes, which you can see here. I'm also going to see if I can drop into the chat. Correct one. A link to these challenges. You can see the themes, the different sub-themes underneath them, and then finally the challenges. So I welcome you to explore those as I go through these slides, or you can follow along with me. So the first theme was school design. How will we design schools for every student and teacher to succeed and belong? And I'll give you a moment to read the sub-themes underneath this, just so you can get a sense of what was under this theme. The second theme was teacher preparation. How will we attract and retain an effective and racially diverse teacher workforce? Theme 3 is STEM instruction. How will we equip teachers to deliver joyful, relevant, and rigorous STEM learning? And theme 4, our final theme, is STEM access. How will we make STEM essential and attainable for everyone? And so these are the challenges that, again, have emerged from nearly 600 voices and this process. And while it's helpful, it's also overwhelming in a few ways, and just it's a lot of challenges. It's serious challenges that we're up against, and sometimes seeing them all together like this can feel just really overwhelming by just what we're up against. But it's, you know, groups of people like this who are so committed, who are coming together to not only understand these problems, but also link arms and solve them, that really keeps us going. And then it's also just overwhelming because even if you want to do that, where do you start? And so our final phase in this process is to identify those challenges that are highest impact, highest leverage, that have the greatest potential, to impact the system. And so we like to call those keystones based off of those keystone species that you find in natural ecosystems that have an outsized impact on the health and the balance of the ecosystem. And so just like natural ecosystems have keystones, so do our social systems. And that's what we want to find with you today. And so just in a little bit, I am going to chat out a link to our relationship mapper where you will be helping us to understand what are the relationships between these challenges so that we can find those that are highest leverage. The first thing that you'll see is a participant questionnaire. This is a short questionnaire where we'll ask you some information about yourself just to better understand who we're collecting data from. Your information will not be shared with anyone else. It will not appear on the map. It's really to make sure that we're hearing from a diversity of perspectives and also that we have an understanding of who's participating in the process. You'll then be taken into the relationship mapper. It'll give you a little bit more information about the tool, including an example question and some instructions of how to do this. So what you'll see is there'll be a challenge at the top. So in our example, it's many cities do not have accessible and reliable public transportation. You'll then be asked, if the above challenge is addressed, are any of the below challenges easier to tackle? And so your task is to answer that question. And we're really looking for direct and obvious relationships. And so I encourage you to really trust your gut. If you're finding yourself being like, okay, I can make an argument for how this is related because if challenge A gets better, then it could make this better, then it can make this better. That's not what we're looking for. We're really looking for like, yes, there's a very direct and obvious way that making progress or solving this challenge is going to make this one better. And so you'll see that example, you'll see how we would have answered that, and then you'll be taken into the content. And you'll be asked that same style of a question, but about challenges from our content area. And so you can see again, these are randomly generated, a challenge at the top, and then the question, if the above challenge is addressed, are any of the below challenges easier to tackle? And so if you, if none of the challenges become easier to tackle, or if it's just you're finding yourself in that way where you're really justifying the relationship, just click none of these. We are, again, only interested in those most obvious and strong relationships. One other thing is we so appreciate you sharing your perspective with us. If you complete one full game, most people have been able to do this in about 10 to 15 minutes. You'll know when you've done it because you'll reach this page that says checkpoint. We are thrilled to be able to send you a link to pick out a $25 gift. And if you don't have enough time to finish that today, don't worry, just leave your window open and you can keep playing. And if you complete 2 or more full games, we will also enter you into a raffle to potentially win an additional $250 gift. So that is your quick overview to the relationship mapper. I am putting it into the chat now. We're a small group, so please don't be shy if you have any questions about the mapping process so far, anything I shared, or getting into the relationship mapper. We're actually going to spend some independent time. Just you're going to go in, you're going to complete the questionnaire, and then you're going to answer the mapper questions. And then I'll set a timer and make sure to bring us back about, let's say, 8 or so minutes before we close out to just make sure that we have a time to reflect on that experience and community. But again, for now, we are going to spend some time independently playing the relationship mapper. And if you're just now joining us, you'll find all the instructions that you need in there. But just pop into the chat if you run into any problems. All right, I'm seeing Kristen's know that she's done. I know that others have played before. If you are playing more, I'll just give you another minute or so to wrap up where you are. And then we have a few discussion questions. And Kristen and event team, you can let me know if this is an option to do. I know I'm totally going off script, but given how small we are, I wonder if we would even, originally I was just gonna have people reflect in the chat, but if we wanted to move to a table and talk about some of these things together, including how we came up with this process, I would love to do that, but also no worries at all if that is something that is too complicated to do. So while we wait for an answer on that, I'll just share our reflection prompts, which we'd love to hear what you noticed when you were playing the relationship mapper. Was it easier or more difficult than you thought it would be to answer the questions? Were there any interesting relationships that you hadn't thought about before until you were going through this and kind of saw them directly against each other like that? Right, I'm going to see if I can get in touch with our support for this room. All right, I'm seeing an okay. Thanks for your patience while we figure this out, but I think it'll be fun to talk to each other about this. All right, and while we work on that, I will just do what would have been our next steps first, just so everyone has that information. We're going to continue to collect data through the relationship mapper through the end of June. And so one of the things we wanted to ask is if there's a group of STEM teachers that you think we should reach out to also contribute their perspectives, would love to connect. I'll put my email in the chat just so that everyone has it. Please feel free to reach out about this or anything else. We'll then spend the rest of the summer analyzing the data, and in the fall, we'll share out the outcome, kind of the full map, the comprehensive view of the challenges, including the keystones. And then, as I mentioned before, this map will be used to guide the shared priorities of the Beyond 100K network and to create a more comprehensive view for the field as a whole. And we're going to continue to keep the map alive so that it reflects the current reality of STEM teachers and students. All right, so thank you so much. Looks like we're going to close out now and hope to see you at one of our tables for some discussion.